All right, now we're live. How's it going, man?
Great.
Welcome to Ponytails. I'm excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
It's not, I mean, listen, um, we believe strongly that you are your units here on this show, of course. And so if that's the case, this is like one of the biggest episodes ever, right?
Well, I went ahead and wore the T-shirt for that, so
Yeah,
sweatshirt,
two,
I should say.
2000 unit club. I didn't even know they made sweatshirts for that. It's like,
Well, yeah, apparently they just started to, and somebody handed me this and said, apparently in the education division, I was the first person to ever do it, and they gave me the sweatshirt, and I thought, this is my first time wearing it, so
no way.
listening the sweatshirt for the Ponytails podcast.
That's wild. I mean, I think and I want to tell people who we have here on the show, although you need no introduction, but how many people have hit 2000 units in a week? I mean, it's like
And
you, Kaya,
yeah,
Ruthie
Kaya,
Ann Taylor.
Kaya's who I learned how to do it from, and then several of the guys I actually coached. So oddly enough, Theo Davies almost hit it. He was like 1,900 units. No. Correction. He did. He crushed it. Theo hit like 2,600 units, maybe. Like Theo had a
That's wild.
huge week. He sold 19,000 units. That's what it was. He was just short of selling 20,000 units, and so he was a 2,000 unit guy.
How wild, man.
And then a lot of the guys over at Bulgaria. So Peter Petkoff, uh,
Dennis, probably.
yeah, Dennis, Emil.
Oh,
So
yeah. That's what. So it's like out of 100,
I'd say.
out of about 200,000 people living or dead or more, I guess at this point that have done this, there's like 4 of you. There's like 5 of you. That's insane. That's wild. Oh man. All right. Well, let me tell people who we're talking to here today. Guys, we're brought to you today by Enlight Energy, and of course, it's a solar company ran by Julio Hernandez, and of course, Alex Black in Florida is working their main division down there. If you guys are looking for an opportunity to go into solar, there is no better place probably than Julio Hernandez as a leader and as a mentor. The guy is awesome. I worked for them for about a year before the podcast started taking off, and I couldn't recommend that opportunity more. They're in all the markets in the US at this point. I think they're up to like 40 something states. So make sure you go check them out or give us a call, give us a message, and we'll get you connected to Julio, guys. Those guys are crushing it over there, growing fast. So if you're into kind of getting into that competitive space and into a fast growing company, that's a good spot for it. And of course, brought to you by Cardinal Senior Benefits. They're coming off another hot year. 2023 is finishing up. They've been doubling every year since 2018 when they first got started. And they're now, I think, working with over 60 alumni of Southwestern, which is bananas. They've now paid in their lifetime about $45 million of commission. So if you guys want to learn a little bit more about that opportunity, make sure you click the link below. We're also going to get you hooked up to talk to either Pedro Vega or Nick Dale or Quentin Roberts. Love you guys a lot. Now, my guest today, as I said, needs no introduction. Dustin Hillis is with us here today. Originally, of course, he is from Ashland, Tennessee. He sold for 4 summers with the OG winning tradition, and he was the former CEO of the Southwestern family of companies. He was recognized as the top 10 CEO by Industry Era in 2021. Before being asked to be CEO of the Southwestern family of companies, Dustin co-founded Southwestern Consulting, and during the 16 years of leading that business, he helped launch and sales and leadership seminar business, consulting business, and coaching business, each of which produced multiple millions per year. Kind of impressive. Let's see what else. The coaching business alone produced over 100 million, and it grew at over 60% per year in the 10 years that Dustin was leading it. He was awarded the top 50 consulting firm CEOs by Consulting Report. I mean, at this point, if you're not yet impressed, you're about to be, but make sure you get your journals and your pens out to take notes because this is about to be crazy. As a bookman, Dustin finished number 1 in his first summer and was the number 1 B contract his second summer while recruiting and managing his first team of 8 people. Then his third summer, he broke the all-time company sales record formerly held by his own wife, Kaya. and who you might know as Kaya Grady, and he was the first person to sell over 20,000 units in the history of a 155-year-old company at the time. Now, then his fourth summer, he finished number one while selling in Alaska with his then fiance Kaya. Today, Dustin is focused on his new company, All Things New Ventures. It's a sweat equity business that has already helped his equity partner companies grow from 30 million in his first year. Now, here's the deal, guys. I had Dustin come on here because he told me a little bit about what this new business venture he's trying out, All Things New Ventures. And here's the deal: it's just from hearing what he's doing, there's no doubt in my mind that this is about to blow up into one of the biggest companies that an alumni has ever produced. I'm so excited to learn a little bit from him. I'm here to be humbled by someone who is doing what I want to do, which is growing a company and growing all other companies at massive, noticeable levels. I mean, at this point, we might be looking into a new kind of alumni, which is like the level up. He's going to break the record for alumni doing cool things in in the world after Southwestern. So hey man, welcome to the show. I'm happy to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me. You're doing good things, Andres.
I appreciate that. Somebody's got to do it, I guess. Somebody's got to do this podcast, right? Talking to book people.
That's right.
Dude, okay, let's just dive in. I mean, there's so much in here. I was looking at what, when we first started talking. Your favorite school is number 8. I will multiply my value 100-fold, which I think is so telling to what you do and how you do it. And I just want to start by just asking the very, very obvious question, which is, tell me a little bit about All Things New Ventures. But maybe if you could start with, like, how did you think of this idea? Because there's other people who, as you've explained to me, will invest in a company or try to uh, help improve a company. And but this seems like a such unique way of doing it. So let's just start with, what is it? How are you doing it? And how did you come up with this idea?
Sure. So after leaving Southwestern, we bought an RV and drove the RV 12,000 miles. We went from Nashville, Tennessee to Cabo, Mexico, from Cabo, Mexico to Spokane, Washington, from Spokane, Washington to New York, and then from New York back down to Nashville, and had 42 stops in between. And once I updated my profile on LinkedIn that I was no longer at Southwestern, started getting some phone calls and people checking in, seeing what I'm doing. And it was actually sorting through several different opportunities that I said no thank you to, that led me to figuring out really what I wanted to do. And it came from just asking questions. As I would talk to people that were wanting me to be a CEO of their company and hearing what they were struggling with, a lot of times it was more the executive strategy that really they needed, and to have someone partner with their CEO rather than just becoming the CEO. And so that kind of got me excited to think, man, what if I had several companies where instead of running the company, I just empowered the company, equipped the company, gave them the right strategy, the right team, the right game plan, and help them to achieve their maximum potential. So the first one was a drone company called Tough Stump,
Mm.
and it was a guy I go to church with. He's the co-founder. His name's Ben Brown. Awesome dude, ex Special Forces, and was my golf buddy. And Ben and my pastor and I all go play golf every Friday. And one Sunday after church, Ben said, "Hey man, I heard you're not with that company you were with for 20 years. Uh, Gosh, that's a long time to be with one company. What are you going to do next?" And I shared with them this idea of maybe helping with business strategy and being a partner with the company to help them grow, and kind of being like a board member. And he said, "Man, that sounds awesome. Would you help our company out?" And so I met his other co-founder, and we started talking, and one thing led to the next. And about 3 months after us starting to work together, they asked me to be the chief strategy officer, and now I'm an equity partner in the business. And we do drone
Oh.
technology for special ops. And so it's situational awareness, geospatial awareness technology. And I'm the only non-military guy in the whole company. I was just there last week in North Carolina at the headquarters next to Fort Liberty, formerly Fort Bragg, and all these guys that spent 20 years doing special ops, and I spent 20 years in corporate America. So I'm kind of the business guy helping them create financials and helped them hire a CFO and redid their lead product line and helping maximize their value is really
Hmm.
what I'm doing. And I had so much fun with them that I thought, what the heck, I'm going to just do this for other people. So put All Things New Ventures together and put a website up, and people have been reaching out saying, hey, this sounds interesting. The next one was called Totally Mushrooms, and it's a mobile mushroom farm, and it's turnkey. The technology is amazing. So you buy a mushroom farm, and it has everything you need to be your own mushroom farmer. And for me, I look at the macro trends. So it's sustainable, organic, healthy food, and you could either sell it and cash flow $3,000 to $5,000 a month off of your mobile mushroom farm forever. You could eat your own mushrooms. You could go to the farmers market and sell your mushrooms, but we also provide
Wow.
the distribution channel for it. So kind of did the same thing with them, helped them put the business model together, helped them actually hire a CFO for that company too. So it's helping with legal, helping with finance, helping with executive strategy, marketing strategy, and business development strategy. So there's five sectors that I'm finding all most of these companies need executive support around.
Okay, so now before we can go, I have so many questions already because this is so interesting and it's fascinating the way that you're doing it. So I guess let's go from the basics of this is different than if you were to say, hey, here's $50 million to invest in your company. I guess these are, I don't know how big these companies are, but instead of like buying equity specifically with cash, you're offering these solutions in exchange for that equity.
Yeah, I call it sweat equity,
Yeah.
and it really is what they need. A lot of times they don't have an equity structure to begin with, so even if they were to raise capital, they don't know how to go about doing it. So some of these companies I have helped raise money. One of the companies I raised $500,000 within 3 months of them engaging with me, and I have a lot of friends that are investors and brought in some guys from New York, and they invested in a company, and they had been trying to raise capital for a long time before engaging with me, and we got it done in about 3 months, and it helped them to keep their lights on and to grow the company. And
That's
so
so cool.
I've had multiple companies that I've helped them get the capital, but you have to be careful when you're taking on investments. Not all money is good money. And so
Mhm.
being able to be smart and to know what your company's worth, number one, knowing how to evaluate the company, number two, knowing how what kind of partner are you looking for? Do you want a passive partner or an active partner? And creating a strategy to grow the company, and finance is always part of the strategy. So I'm a big fan of bringing on strategic partners. So someone that wants to put in, $1 million, $5 million, and they have resources to bring to the table, and they can
Yeah.
actually become part of the executive team. They can be a board member, and they help elevate the whole company. So, but sometimes passive investments are also needed, and the founders are just like, hey, we just need cash, and let's just get some terms together that are exciting for the investor. Let's put a plan together of how they're going to get their ROI, and let's go crazy. And
Yeah.
I help them do that. I know people who are very interested in that, and bring those people to the table, and we do it. And a lot of times it is the um, I'm finding it's the vouching for the company that matters. So it's kind of like think of Shark Tank, except one of the sharks is actually willing to be part of the company and to tell the other sharks, this is legit. You guys should do it. And
Yeah, that
so,
works. Yeah.
so there's a piece of it where my friends and folks that just know me are saying, "Hey, let us know if this is something we should do," type of thing. So,
Now, well, that's pretty sweet. So we had Patrick Dichter on here, and he doesn't quite do this, but it's a similar vein of like, hey, you're taking ownership of a new business. And so one of the questions I had for him, which I wanted to ask you from your perspective, is as you go into working with these companies, as you start partnering with these companies, is there are there like the common mistakes or common things that you're finding when you run into them? So for example, like and this could be targeted this question I guess could be targeted for people who are listening who maybe own a business already and they're thinking, okay, uh I don't know what I don't know. So are there any common threads that you see as you start partnering with someone that it's like, okay, most of them don't have a CFO, for example, or maybe it's something like these people just have no idea how to truly value their product, line and how much it should cost, right? Their bottom line, or anything like that. Like, are there things that you notice that it's like a pretty common theme among entrepreneurs that you work with?
yes, the lack of a true executive strategy, having a step-by-step plan that says, "Here's where we are, and here's where we're going," and breaking it down into actionable, tangible growth strategies. And so a lot of entrepreneurs, they have a really good idea, they have a really good product, they're willing to work hard, but they don't think about what's going to get us from 1 million to 10 million. What's going to get us from 10 million to 20 million? What's going to get us from 20 million to 100 million? And what's going to get us from 100 million to a billion? And what gets you from a startup to 1 million is much different than what gets you from 1 million to 10 million. And what gets you from 10 million to 20 million is much different than what gets you from 20 million to 100.
Mm.
And then what gets you from 100 to a billion is much different. So understanding that and knowing the dynamics, the growth dynamics, the stages of growth of a business, and when to build infrastructure, when to create departments within your company, when to bring in capital and when not to bring in capital, knowing what your valuation target should be and looking at macroeconomic trends and setting targets based on those macroeconomic trends and based on what the competition is doing and having market comparisons. Those are all, a lot of entrepreneurs aren't thinking that way. And so when you come in and day one start providing that, then they get a lot of clarity. And then once you have clarity, now you can make decisions. And I just have fun providing the strategic uh, clarity and doing the work. I always love recruiting. So recruiting, and a lot of people don't know how to recruit executives. So
Mm.
recruiting like a salesperson is much different than recruiting a CFO. And so I have fun recruiting all of them. You know, I love recruiting salespeople, love recruiting executives. I love recruiting CEOs. I recruited a CEO recently, and it was fun asking questions as a CEO to another CEO that probably would throw them off. Like most people probably wouldn't ask them certain questions, but you know,
Mm.
what the heck? You might
Yeah.
as well really test their metal in a certain way on the interview. But and that's not many people probably are doing that. So uh,
So yeah, so
all those.
the executive strategy is like the number one thing that entrepreneurs are kind of they and it's probably because okay, let's just take this as an example. Hum. You ever heard of Hum? It's a kombucha brand.
No.
So Hum was started by a book woman, actually a book couple at the time. It's a kombucha. It's very, very popular. It's now nationwide. I think it's international now. They're huge. I mean, it's a giant company as far as a brand as well. But when she started, she literally said, and this is probably the story of most entrepreneurs, right? She said, we had her on the show and she's like, I knew how to do two things. I knew how to go door to door and I knew how to make kombucha. So in Bend, Oregon, she started just going door to door selling kombucha. And most entrepreneurs probably that's how they fall into their business, right? Is they know how to do something well and they knew, like you said, they can work hard, but they probably get and things start coming their way, right? Money starts maybe coming in, not necessarily like in the millions, but just it's working. Their product or service is really taking off. but they get to a point where it gets so big and there's so many moving parts that, as you say, the executive strategy is just what, because people don't really start with that. People don't really begin with the end in mind, as I guess, to put it in a different way, as we were taught, and so that's important to know. If somebody's listening out there and you're like in that grind right now where like you're starting to take off and it's starting to come through, maybe these are some of the things you need to start thinking about. I was like, okay, how do we grow? And I'm glad you're sharing that. Now, are there any red flags that you look at? Like, say you have somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, Dustin, I heard you on this awesome, really cool podcast named Pony Tails Podcast. It's such a cool podcast, my favorite podcast of all time. And I heard about you. I wanted to ask you because I have a business and I wanted to see if you wanted to be a partner. Come check this out." Are there any red flags that you look for that makes you go, no, I will not ever work with that company because this?
Yeah. If the leader is so there's three things actually. The first one is, does the executive team gel with me? And basically, if someone is mean, I don't know what other word to use, critical, overly negative, I just don't have enough time to deal with people that are negative and critical and judgmental. And if I see them treating other people that way, they're talking smack about anybody and everybody, and just saying how critical, like everybody basically is like everybody else is stupid besides me type of leader, then that's a red flag. The second one is the core values of the company. So what do they actually do? And I've had several opportunities where people wanted me to kind of step in and help, but the crux of what they do didn't align with my core values. And actually, I just launched another website, DustinHillis.com,
Yeah.
and it's more geared towards like keynotes and public speaking type of thing. But as I was building out the website, I thought, it'd be cool is just to put my core values on my website. And so DustinHillis.com, I listed those core values out. Actually, on All Things New, I think in the About section, I have listed the core values for All Things New. And I literally look at them to like remind myself, okay, as I'm evaluating an opportunity and we're going through that dating phase, I'm like, am I really excited about what these people do? And am I really excited about the leader's core values? And if I see that the leader is off on those core values, then it's time to pass. And I'll pass them off to get a coach. I think everybody needs coaching, and so I've already actually passed several people over to Southwestern Consulting and said, hey, this would be a better fit for you to go get a coach somewhere, to go find another person
And learn those things and understand them. Yeah.
learn those things. But if I'm going to join the team and be part of something, I want to know it's in line with those core values. And so and then the third one is the opportunity to scale. So the goal is looking at their financials and looking at the model and looking at the economics behind it and the macro trends, is to see if it can go to 100 million. And so the vision for All Things New Ventures is to always have 5 businesses we're engaged with, 5 more that are coming in to the queue, and 1 every year that is being monetized in some way. And the goal is for each one to have 100 million valuation when
Wow.
we monetize.
I have no doubt.
So then when we there's not all businesses can scale to that level. Just pure economics, the market's not that big. So that's why I wanted to get into drone technology. I wanted to get into food, healthcare. I have a healthcare technology company I had a phone call with today. That was my phone call right before this, was a healthcare tech company. So I want to play in the playground that can be significant and make a big impact, and financially can make a difference.
Yeah, it's where all the big kids play.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
ready to play in the NFL.
That's right. And if you can't, that's and it seems like you've always been a person, from what I know of you and kind of the way you're talking, is you think big, and that's the start of any business that ever made it like that. They had to think big at the beginning, as Mort Utley would remind us, right? When you think big, something always happens. But um, what on scalability a little bit, because I know that typically good systems lead to good scalability. And you mentioned the financials, but is there anything that assuming that the market is there for a business that you would give maybe a quick advice to people listening of like, hey, to prep your business for scaling, here's like a couple things you need to think about as you're going in that direction.
Well, it goes back to the 5 core pillars that I look at when starting off with a new business with all things new ventures. And by the way, this is the same thing I've done in all the other roles that I've had my whole life. Is starting with the executive strategy and making sure that's right. Again, I don't care how good the product is. I don't care how good the leader is. If the strategy is not right at a certain point, it hits a wall. Second is looking at the marketing strategy. And that was interesting. A lot of companies, they just kind of laugh about marketing and they think it's not important. I think it's super important. Even door to door, I remember if you think of names and you think of like how we utilize those, especially now with Facebook and the way people are doing those postings with having people share the testimonial of them holding the books and they got the kids there.
Yeah.
That's marketing, and it's genius. And the guys that are selling 2,000 units now, I think Emil really mastered it back when he first broke the record, and that was him figuring out how do I go door to door and focus on marketing. Well, most companies are the same way. They're not realizing, hey, social media marketing is important. And a lot of the executives I know, they shy away from social media. They think, oh, I just don't do that. And it's like, man, well, you're missing out. But you're missing out. It's free. It's effective. It's what people want. It's how people make decisions. I mean, I
Mm,
buy stuff on Instagram.
right.
It's like people, lots of people do. And so, marketing strategy would be number two. And you'd call it the go-to-market strategy. And when I think of a go-to-market strategy, it's marketing with your product line. So, marketing is kind of a broad term. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I do marketing." It's like that's like saying,
Yeah.
I'm a human. And
I
so
play sports and you're like an
I
NFL
play
star. It's like,
sports. Yeah, that's like saying I play sports. It's like
okay.
congratulations. So you have to really get specific about like what part of marketing are you focused on. So your product matters. Are you priced right? And with product strategy, looking at the opportunity to scale, residual products, and reoccurring revenue, and contracts that go into perpetuity. So if you're wanting to 10x a company, one of the first things you can do is just look at the product mix. So the drone company is a great example. For 8 years, they only sold training services and they were one-off trainings. And it was like the Pentagon calling saying, hey, train our soldiers on this drone technology, and they pay a lot of money. We would go and train them, and we were known for being the best. Tough Stump Technologies is the best at drone technology training, period. But our contracts weren't in perpetuity, and it was just we didn't think about it, so we weren't
Mm,
asking the special ops team to do it every year, and we didn't have online training. So that was an example where we looked at not only the contract but the delivery mechanism. So we created a learning management system. So now we have Tough Stump University, and you can go online right now and see it. And we have
wow.
TAC University. So Tactical Awareness Kit is TAC, and it's what military people use to create missions. So they use this pad to create their mission, and we have always been the leader in training people how to use TAC technology. Well, now it's online. So we have a customer right now where there are about 1,400 people in this military group that are going to buy it. And once they buy it, there's 17 other groups that'll follow suit. So you do the math, and
Wow.
every year. So it's equal to about $400,000 in revenue in perpetuity. So one client's $400,000 forever, and then you get 17 of them to do it, and now you have a 10x company in
There it
less than
is.
a year. And it was just looking at one product to put it together the
Yeah.
right way.
That's not even like one section of your company. That's one product within the products of your company.
That's right.
That's wild.
And if you do that 5 times, now you're talking, that's how you get to 100 million. That's how you take a company from 5 million to 100 million. And then you got to market it right. So putting together a comprehensive social media strategy, branding, getting the brand right, getting the copy right, getting the web design right, training your team what to say when they answer the phone, and hey, I'm interested in ordering 1,400 of these trainings you're putting out. Knowing what to say, that's marketing. It's all part of the same thing. So anyways, I could go on and on about that, but that's important.
Yeah.
Business development is a whole section. So outside of marketing, but related to marketing, is the biz dev side of things. So that's what most Southwestern people focus on and take great pride in. But where are you getting your leads? How are you generating leads? Once you have a lead, what's your lead conversion strategy? And
Yeah.
some people do it digitally, and they create funnels, and they take people down digitally. Some people get on the phone, they qualify them, they get them going through a process to make sure they're qualified. Some people just go and knock on their door, and they talk to them. So having that business development process is super important. Then and then obviously once you're there, you have your presentation, answering objections, closing. But that's all like basic stuff that most Southwestern people already know, but it's very important. And I'd say Southwestern people, that's kind of the zone that if you sold books door to door for several years, you probably have some skills within biz dev. A lot of companies don't, though, and so that's why you see super successful alumni out there in specifically the business development section of a business. Next is legal. So we have executive strategy, marketing strategy, and business development strategy, and now legal strategy. Legal is super important. And I remember going to lunch with Spencer Hayes, and it was back when I first was a co-founder at Southwestern Consulting. And he said, Dustin, what do you think the most important people within your company are? And I thought it was going to be, my top producers and salespeople was what I thought the answer was going to be. And he smiled and he said, your accounting person and your legal person are the two people that you need to have the best relationship with. And it blew my mind because I for sure would have thought it was the sales team. And so as I've seen all these other businesses, and a lot of people, they don't even know what a legal strategy is. Their contracts are a mess. The mushroom business is a great example. A lot of the contracts were handshakes, and so it was just like, hey, yeah, I'll buy 500 pounds of mushrooms at $7 a pound from you, and they would shake hands, and then we would invest millions, literally millions of dollars into the infrastructure of building out the production of these mobile mushroom farms, and then we don't have a signed contract from the wholesale buyer of the mushrooms. So it's just basic things. Once you understand that it's basic, but it's not basic for people that are in the grind, in the trenches, just trying to make it happen.
Yeah.
So getting your contracts and making sure the contracts are fair. I've seen just bizarre agreements, and you want your employee contracts, you want the vendor contracts, you want the equity contracts to all be equitable and be fair. And I think that you'll get a reputation based on that. And when everybody knows that, hey, this is the kind of company I want to deal with, they come to you. They come out of the cornfields, and they say, "Hey, I heard about you working with so and so, and man, can we help you with this?" And they know your terms are reasonable, and they know that you're going to treat them right while you're working with them. And you know, if something were to go wrong, it's always mapped out in that legal strategy. So,
Do you want to? I mean, first of all, if people are listening to this and they're not writing these things down, shame on you. What are you doing? Especially if you're not an entrepreneur. Even if you're not an entrepreneur. Um, one of the so after I left Southwestern, I one of the most impressive CEOs I've ever met, and I'd love to connect you with him in general, just because I think even if you don't become partners through all things new, it's just a good connection, and a sharp young kid named Chandler Bolt. He is the CEO of selfpublishing.com, and they're a school that teaches you how to self-publish. Amazing, sharp dude. But one of the things I heard from him, and I think he heard it from someone, and I think I was reading his book or something, but I got to meet him, and he said one of the most, kind of like what Spencer Hayes said to you, but in a different vein, because to answer the objection of, yeah, but Dustin, but legal is expensive, or accounting is expensive. And he said, look, a good lawyer and a good accountant are never too expensive, because eventually at some point they will pay for themselves. And that is such sound advice that you don't know. The number of times I've had someone on the show here, whether it was with relations with other companies or like that, said something at some point in their life where they were like, oh, we didn't look over the contract, or I thought he had my best interest in mind, or something like that, that made them shoo away the idea of getting lawyers involved in things. And then it bit them in the ass later. I mean, it's been several times, and it wasn't like for $50. I mean, this was major contracts, whether with a client or a business that they were partnering with, and they ended up on the wrong end of that stake, and it bit them hard, 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 hard.
it's always worth it. Never sign a contract without having a lawyer look at it, and have a good lawyer that you trust, and have a strategy. You know, a lot of people, they only hire lawyers when there's a lawsuit, and they don't think of using lawyers proactively to, get trademarks, to get patents, to make sure the contracts actually add value to the product mix, and all those things add value to a company and protect you. So yeah, having a lawyer, legal, and having a goal, having a legal strategy as part of your goal is something that rarely happens. So,
Yeah, amen to that. So was that the fourth one? What was the fifth one then?
finance. So having a financial strategy. It's amazing when you meet with a lot of these entrepreneurs, and they have successful businesses. They're doing millions a year, and then you ask them, "Hey, what's your long-term vision?" And then they get this look on their face, and they go, "That's a great question." And so uh, a lot of times they turn it to me and they say, "What do you think? What do you think we should be doing?" And it's kind of funny because I've created a lot of clarity about all things new. And a lot of times by the time we get to that question, I've already researched their industry and looked at the trajectory, looked at other market comparisons to know if they can hit 100 million. I'll just throw it out there and I'll be like, "Hey, what if you set a goal to do 100 million, and we put a business plan together and reverse engineered all the steps that you would need to take to hit 100 million? Would that be something you'd be interested in?" And they typically say, "Yeah." And
Uh-huh.
that's kind of our launching point, is taking $100 million valuation, and then I have 12 steps that I follow to increase the value of a company. So we start walking through those 12 steps, and they work.
Hmm. Dang, that's awesome, man. That is so cool. Okay. Well, I have, by the way, I have so many more questions, but I know you're limited on time. And also, some of this is just like stuff that we could get nerdy about with, like, CEO stuff now. But I wanted to touch base on this because I think it's something that we're doing. It's a project that we're working on right now together. And I wanted to make sure we at least touched on this. And I'm sure we'll skip around and talk about all sorts of different aspects of all things new ventures. But one of the things that, for people who are listening, this is a good place to promote this. If you are listening to this going, I wish I could listen to this guy, and whether you know Dustin or not, I wish I could just listen to Dustin talk with other CEOs of other companies, or just share some of these ideas regularly, a couple times a month, well, do we have good news for you? So Dustin and I, we launched Unicorn Podcast, which is now the parent company of Ponytails Podcast LLC. And with that, we're doing podcast production for different companies who want to increase their brand and use a podcast as a way of creating and building a community of followers, of people who are like-minded and think the way they do and appreciate the advice and insight. And so it made total perfect sense for Dustin and I to partner up. So we're launching All Things New Ventures podcast. So be on the lookout for that, where we're going to be interviewing it'll either be Dustin interviewing CEOs, or it'll be just Dustin talking about things like this, things to look out for, common things that he sees in companies as he's working with them that he wants to highlight and share some wisdom on. And of course, talking to some of his clients to really understand aspects and industries of the variety of people that he's working with. So if you guys are checking that out and are regular listeners of Ponytails, we'll be launching that over the next few weeks, but we'll keep an eye out. We're still getting some of the guests together, but I just wanted to at least promote that right now, just because I think, like, I was about to say I could talk to you about this for hours, and it's like, oh, well, we're kind of going to do that. So great. So
Yeah, I'm excited about it, and the folks I've already reached out to are very successful entrepreneurs and leaders, CEOs, owners of companies, and they have a lot of valuable things to learn. I'm constantly learning from my friends that are out there making it happen, doing exciting things, and I just love sharing that with other people. I feel that's my calling, that God put me on earth to help people achieve their God-given potential, and this podcast will be a great way of helping live into that mission.
I love that. So let me ask you this. I actually had this thought earlier, and I wanted to make sure I asked you, where did you learn all this? Because you're so wise with all these things, and clearly your experience as a CEO has obviously shaped and sharpened this skill of yours of growing companies. But before you got started as a CEO at Southwestern, or maybe even consulting, who mentored you? Where did you, like, what books did you read? What classes did you take? How did you absorb all this information and get to this point?
I would say, based on feedback that other people have told me, multiple folks that I've worked really closely with have said I'm the most coachable person that they've ever met. And so I think that if there was to say, what's my superpower is being willing to be coachable and to take feedback and actually apply it, and to learn, and to have a desire to learn, and to never feel like I know it all, and to never feel like I'm the smartest person in the room. And maybe it goes all the way back to growing up. I always struggled with academics, and I was
Oh,
bullied as a kid, and I was not a cool kid. And so I never had as a little kid, I never had the thought that I'm just the smartest person in the room, or the best at whatever. And so I think it just humbled me to get picked on, and I wouldn't recommend it. I actually have a disdain for bullies, and I think everybody does. But I have an extra experience of it actually happened to me, and it wasn't cool, but it might have developed some muscles within me to know how to deal with people who are mean, and being a bully, but then learning from it, and becoming better because of it. And from there, I mean, really, I think becoming a Christian was the biggest thing. When I was 13 years old, dedicated my life to Christ, and I was pretty subpar before then, and all of a sudden it was like my eyes were open for the first time. It's the first time I remember experiencing enthusiasm. I remember
oh,
just being like life kind of sucked before that. And I was like a big video game kid. Probably the coolest thing I did before becoming a Christian was playing NBA Jam,
yeah.
and so that was the first time enthusiasm and excitement entered my life. And lots of good things started happening from there. That's when I got into sports and started playing football, started wrestling. Found out I was actually pretty good at both. Ended up getting a scholarship to play college football. Did pretty well at wrestling, and then
Wow.
started gaining confidence, and all the other things started coming with that. And then along came Southwestern, and did pretty well with that. And it was building blocks. It was like one thing that you do really successful builds on the next thing that builds on the next thing, and your confidence grows as you win. Success breeds more success, as everybody's heard from Zig Ziglar, and it's true. And so I think the catalyst of that was God, and every time I've had struggles, I'd say was the most removed I've been from God. And as things have progressed and really cool things that were beyond my understanding happen, was probably when I've been the closest to God. So
Wow.
it's
That's
pretty
cool.
it's pretty correlated.
And then, yeah, and I like that you said success breeds success, because then that leads you to meet really brilliant people. Having lunch with Spencer Hayes can't be a terrible waste of time
Yeah,
in your life.
being willing to have lunch with people like that. And funny enough, I mean, I went to that lunch, and like a dork, I had a pad, a paper. So this is how I came to lunch, was sitting there with my pen, and I sat down. I said, "All right, Spencer. So thanks for inviting me to lunch. Now, what advice do you got for me?" And that's how I showed up to lunch with my pad and my paper ready to go.
Spencer's just like, what, dude?
Oh,
Try,
he loved it.
try the sandwich.
Yeah, no, he. I guarantee you, he thought that was cool. So,
Oh man, who's speaking of like mentors like that? Who's the biggest mentor you have in your life?
hmm. My dad recently overcame brain surgery, and he's always been a huge mentor in my life. He actually started a company called Hillis Metro Flooring, sold his company to Southwestern back in the day. That's how I got connected with Southwestern.
Wait, really?
Yeah, yeah. They bought my dad's company, and so then I remember growing up, him telling me things like, "Hey, anything you can put your mind to, you can do." And that's like one of my earliest memories, was him saying that. And so, and then watching him overcome brain cancer recently has reinvigorated just how much I appreciate him, how much of a role model he is. Um, he has tremendous faith, positivity, and after, I mean, going through one of the hardest things I could imagine, just his perspective on life, his focus on the family, and just being a all around good human is something that really inspires me. And my dad's one of the best business people I know. I've learned more about business from him than anybody. And
Wow.
so, yeah, I'd say my dad.
We should have your dad on the podcast.
He'd love it. Yeah. I guess if Southwestern bought his company, he could be an
He
honorary.
he could be an honorary guest,
Yeah.
or we should have him as a guest on your podcast.
Oh,
We got both. I think both would work. That's awesome, man. And
yeah.
so let's talk about a little bit about the future. So what's the North Star for you? When we've been talking about these like big strategies for um, all these other companies, and you kind of touched a little bit on having five, and then five that are incoming, and then one that's switched. But do you have like any other big goals or aspirations for either All Things New Ventures or other projects that you have working?
Yeah. Just having in the next 10 years the total value be $1 billion seems to be motivational.
That's cool.
And it's more just what I could do with that. One of my goals is to give away 20% of all income to charities. So I'm the chairman of the board of a nonprofit called Old School Farm, and we employ people with disabilities. We grow healthy food, and then we distribute the food to people in the food desert, people in need. And so I would love to see that in every city across America, and growing healthy food, helping people with disabilities, and feeding the hungry. I mean,
That's not a bad cause.
yeah, it's pretty
Jesus
awesome.
did that.
That's
That
that's
was
right.
kind of his thing.
That's kind of what he did.
It's in a book.
Yeah, the best-selling book of all time,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. Huge character in that one, by the way. I mean,
Yeah.
it's when you see there was a comedian one time that was like, he was a Jewish guy, but he was like, tremendous character. Honestly, it's really risky when a book inserts a major character so late in the series, but honestly, they nailed it.
It was exactly halfway through the book with a major plot twist.
Yeah, just incredible. Yeah, just kept going.
Yeah.
Page turner. No, that's awesome, man. I think that's so cool that you were planting that part of your personal journey and goal and big thinking processes to give back.
Oh, yeah.
That you don't hear much. Um, I mean, you hear about some people and some cool CEOs that are coming through, but generally speaking, when people think of like capitalism and people who have money and billion-dollar value, they don't really think of someone who is selfless like that. You hear Warren Buffett, he's going to give away most of his money, and you hear people like Mark Cuban who are like very obviously involved in giving back. All that what he's doing with his companies, and so to hear another really super successful CEO talk about giving back and not hoarding, I guess, and trying to help people in need specifically, it's just cool. It's really inspiring, and I commend you for that. I think that's really cool, man. So awesome. Okay, I wanted to ask you a little bit about some Southwestern stuff. Do you mind if we switch gears into Southwestern?
Sure.
Okay, so this is normally when we go back in time. And oh, by the way, I think I've heard an email come in. I don't know if it's on your end or mine. I just turned on my do not
I think
disturb.
that's your end. Yeah.
That's so weird.
Mine's turned off.
Have you heard it too?
Yeah.
Okay, so my do not disturb is also turned off. So I don't understand where that's coming from. So for those of you listening, apologies. It is what it is. But it's a casual conversation, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, man. So I'll wind the clocks back because you just touched on this. But how did you get into Southwestern in the first place? So we're looking back at 2002, the summer of '02. How did you hear about going door to door?
So again, going back to my dad, so I played football. I got hurt playing middle linebacker, and went home that semester. And my dad said, "Well, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?" And at that point, football had been my whole life. So I was like, "Shoot, I don't even know." And he said, "Well, I think you ought to go sell books with Southwestern." I was like, Dad, sales is your thing. I'm probably going to do something in athletics. And he goes, "Well, you were just talking to me about that car that you want to buy." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, how are you going to pay for that car?" And I was like, "I thought you were going to pay for it." And he said, "I'll tell you what. Um, if you go and sell books," he goes, "I've seen kids in their very first summer get checks of $20,000. I was like, "What? Do they got drugs in these books or what?" And he's like, "No, seriously, I've seen. You can make a lot of money, and I'll pay half of your car if you do it." And so that was it. I just said, "Okay, let's go."
But
And so he called Roger Smith, and Roger drove from Nashville. Actually, he sent Keith Kimball. Uh, Keith Kimball drove from Nashville down to Dalton, Georgia, and met me in my living room and signed me up to sell books. And then he did the parent visit at the same time. And my mom came in, and he was trying to go through the whole process, telling my mom like, "Hey, this is gonna be hard. Dustin's gonna want to quit and all this stuff." And my mom like gets this weird look and looks at me and goes, "Is this something you're wanting to do?" And I was like, "Yeah, Dad said it's gonna be good." And then she looked at Keith and said, "Well, why are you talking to me?" He said, "Oh, it's part of the process, and that's what it's going to do." And she was like, "Well, if Dustin said he's going to do it, he's going to do it." And she just walked out of the room. And so Keith's sitting there like, "What in the world's going on here?" And then I'm like, "Hey, I got some friends where we just bought a 6-pack of beer. Now it's really important. I gotta go." And so I literally just like leave Keith. Like I'm like, "Hey man, you gotta go." I was like, "You got something for me to sign?" And he like had me sign, whatever, the letter of intent, or my mom signed the whatever it was. And literally we fast forward to the week before, or a few days before sales school, and I get a phone call, and I'm driving down the road, and it's Roger Smith, and he says, "Hey Dustin, yeah, just checking in, making sure you're still coming to sales school out in Nashville on Sunday." And this was on Friday. And I was like, oh, shoot, that's this Sunday? And he goes, yeah, that whole thing Keith told you about. And so I was like, yeah, I'll be there. And he's like, you'll be there? Like with a shocked sound in his voice. And I was like, yeah. So he's like, okay. And my buddy hands me a blunt as we're driving down the road smoking weed. And he said, what was that? And I take a puff and I'm like, I'm going to go sell books door to door this summer. And he goes, what? And I hadn't told any of my friends anything. And they're like, what the heck? I thought you were going to be with us all summer. I was like, nah, man, I'm out. And so my buddy in proper Dalton, Georgia fashion said, well, there's only one thing we can do. We need to throw a huge party. And so they threw this huge party and didn't go to sleep that night. And the next morning woke up and the sun was already coming up. And my buddy walks outside and he looks at the sun and looks at me and he goes, hey, didn't you say you were going to Nashville today? I was like, shoot, I got to go to Nashville. Oh my gosh. And so I drove home. My mom's in the kitchen cooking Eggo waffles. And she's already awake for the day. And I'm like, hey, Mom. She's like, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Nashville to do that book selling thing today. She's like, you're really going to do that? And I was like, yeah, I told you I was. And she's like, you're leaving like today? I was like, yeah, I got to leave like right now. And she was like, oh, okay. So I go downstairs and I'm not packed or anything. And I don't have any clean clothes. And so like, it was just like complete disaster. I was just a wreck. I was a mess.
Just the opposite of what you'd want a first year to be doing.
Oh, everything that you
like the opposite.
That's right. Everything that's the worst thing you could imagine for a first year.
No, you don't even know there's a sales talk.
No. Oh, I don't. A sales talk. I haven't even heard of a sales talk. And so and you can't make this up, Andres. I don't even have a bag. Like I'm looking around and I can't find my suitcase. So I thought, oh, you know what? I don't even need a suitcase. So I literally get a black trash bag and I don't even have clean clothes. So I throw dirty clothes into a black trash bag and I put it over my shoulder and I walk upstairs and my mom's, sitting there still cooking some waffles. And I'm like, all right, Mom, I'm out of here. And she's like, you want some waffles, Eggo waffles for the road? And I was like, that sounds great. So she hands me my plate of Eggo waffles and I take my trash bag of dirty clothes and I throw them in my car and I take off to Nashville. And about halfway between Dalton and Nashville, I stop at an old Texaco bathroom and use the bathroom. And I look down and I see this lump in my sock. I'm like, what the heck is this? And so upon further inspection, one of my friends, unbeknownst to me, had put drugs in my sock as a going away gift. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what the heck is going on? And so I flushed the drugs down the toilet and I looked myself in the mirror and it was probably the defining moment of my entire career at Southwestern was actually before even getting to sales school. Because it was like my life flashed before my eyes and I saw what my life was going to look like if I just stayed in Dalton doing drugs and doing all the things I was doing.
Partying.
And it was basically, I was going to go to hell and, or I was living a life of hell, however you want to say it. And so I just looked myself in the eyes and I got teary eyed. And I said, no matter what this selling book thing is, no matter what, I'm going to prove to myself that I have what it takes to not be a loser. And I'm going to give this everything that I've got. And I got in my car and I drove to sales school. And that's when I entered Southwestern.
So you show up with a black trash bag full of dirty clothes on minimal sleep.
No, zero sleep. I did not sleep for 1 second the night before getting to
Atrium Way. Hey, what's up, guys?
I actually slept through Dan Moore's Mr. Mediocrity. I was in the back asleep for
no.
Yeah, I didn't hear it till my second summer.
No, it's so good.
Everybody looked at me like weird, like, yeah, you didn't hear it last year? I was like, no, I don't remember this.
It's so good. Can we talk about how legendary that speech is? By the way, my brother did it this last summer since Dan's gone. And he crushed it. He crushed it.
Your brother is perfect for that. Your brother is one of my favorite people in the world.
Yeah, he's great. He's one of
That
my
is
favorite
the
people in the
perfect
world.
person to carry on that speech. And, Dan didn't create it. It was actually he
Yes.
was a carry on of a legend of the past, and now your brother is
Yeah.
carrying on from the
What a
legend.
baton to carry, huh? Yeah, when we had Dan on the show, he told us about how he got that speech, and it was amazing. It
Yeah.
was just really incredible. When you said that Danny's one of your favorite people in the world, you sounded a lot like my mother. I was like, all right, okay, mom,
And you, and
okay, yeah. Now, now you really sound like her. Now you must be talking to Sandra regularly. But anyway, okay, so that Mr. M speech. I mean, is there a more legendary speech at sales school than just that first? I mean, besides the pony from Mort, but that's a video recording nowadays. Is there? I mean, that's like
yeah,
the
the
iconic, right?
board speech was pretty important for me. I thought they were all good. I mean, I don't know if I would say one was more important than the other. Um, for me, I think it was actually going in with the attitude of you'd have to kill me before I quit. A lot of the motivational stuff actually was not impactful for me, and
Mm,
I cared more about the technical stuff. So I would sit in the back and kind of sleep through the Mr. Mediocrity. But I remember hearing Ron Alford teach advanced. So actually, Kevin Johnson was the first one. I remember KJ teaching advanced sales, and I was like, "Oh, advanced sales!" And I remember going from the back all the way to the front and clicking my pen. And KJ taught how to do a buying atmosphere and something else. And I was like, "Oh, that's good, yeah." And so that was more
wow.
impactful for me, was really the technical things that I didn't know about.
Legendary. Now I gotta ask this. Do you remember this? Because and if you don't remember this, that's totally cool. But I gotta brag a little bit about my Southwestern heritage. So going into 2002, in 2001, Force and the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, my alma mater. Here's that degree, baby.
Huh.
They were the number one school, and they had the top salespeople in the world. What was it like to have those legends to learn from? Do you remember?
Oh man, I don't. In my first summer, I was so oblivious. Literally,
You were catching up from the hangover.
yeah. I mean, I needed sleep. I wasn't paying attention to anything besides survival. And I mean, I was so bad. My last day of sales school, Roger tried to convince me to stay and said, "You're not ready to go. You can't get through your
Yeah.
approach." And I had to sell him on allowing me to go out for my first summer.
I
And
remember that. That's like a legendary story about you in in the lore of Southwestern people who were legends. Like that was something that they said about you was that you got asked to stay back and you had to be like, no, I'm going.
yeah, I literally had to convince him. That was my first sell I ever made, was convincing Roger to let me go to the book field. And even once I got there, it was wild and crazy. And my first week, I ended up finishing number one. I was the number one first year, my very first week on the book field. And I remember going to the Sunday meeting, and Amanda True was the OL that summer, and she was like, "Hey, Dustin, yeah, come here. Well, congratulations, you're on the cover of the Pace Setter." And I said, "What's a Pace Setter?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, could you give me those order books?" And I was like, "Sure." So I handed her, the stack of order books, and I looked. I remember I didn't know what was happening till my second summer. In my second summer, the managers were looking at calling through the order book, and they were calling my customers to make sure they were legit customers and making sure I wasn't padding my stats. And sure enough, they called all my customers, and they were all real customers. And I didn't even think anything of it. My first summer, I was like, "Oh man, customer service here is really good. They're like double
They follow through.
customers." And
Oh man.
I was on the cover of the Pacesetter that first week, and that's the first time I even heard of it. And then
Wow.
I went on my third week. I guess I hit President's Club, and then by my fifth week, I hit Mort. And so,
You hit Mort your first year?
yeah, I hit it twice.
Wow. That's wild. I mean, Mort is a special thing to hit in general. But that's awesome. Because I remember, so now here, let me make sure this is accurate. Because back then there was two divisions. So it was education and power. You were in education.
That's right.
And in power, it was Matt Atchison who was the number one on that side of the ballpark. But you still beat him overall, right? You were still the number one.
Barely. Yeah.
You guys were real
It was
close, right?
really close. Yeah. It was like just a few units between the
Yeah.
two of us. And
I mean, talk about another legend. I mean, that was.
he's a superstar.
I
Yeah.
mean, the guy he was one of those people. You have this too. I've met enough of you guys through here where it's just like, oh, you just good. I mean, you're coachable. So that's your superpower. I don't know what his superpower is, but when you meet people like that who are just good at the job, you're like, oh,
I'm
you were
not
one of
sure
those.
his is incredibly good looks. That's what.
Out. That's true. A man is sharp dressed man. He's like, ooh, you sharp. Don't cut nobody.
He doesn't even have to talk. He just
No.
people just buy. Yeah.
Yeah. I had Elena Arndt on the show one time, and she was telling me she was following him one day, and he's like, the story goes, hey, stay in the car. He goes on and talks to this lady on the driveway for like 30 seconds and then comes back, goes, okay, I just hit more. Let's go get a beer. And it was like a Saturday. I'm like, what? Like, what do you it's because you're good looking. No, but on a more serious note, the dude's an incredible hard worker. And I heard that summer it was pretty cool to watch from people who recall you guys going at it your first summer to watch it happen, because it was, it was like 6,200 or something units. You guys were really crushing, and it was cool. It was cool. So that's awesome. Now, okay, I have a couple questions. I always ask these about first summer, especially, but obviously we're going to have more discussions about your multiple summers here. But do you remember your first customer?
I do. Yeah, my very first day, my second door I knocked on. The first door, it was a lady. It was like 7:40 in the morning, and I woke her up, and she wouldn't open the door, and she was like, "Go away." And I remember overhearing student managers talking in the parking lot about getting pre-approach, and I was like, and it was a line. What was the line? Can you help me with my map? And so somehow I learned that like right out of the gates, and I remember thinking, okay, I'm gonna really like. I didn't know the sales talk, but I remember, can you help me with my map? And so she was about to slam the door in my face, and I like put my map out, and I was like, "Excuse me, can you help me with my map?" And she was like, rubbing the sleep out of her eyes, and she's like, "What?" And I was like, "I just, I'm talking to the people with kids. It's really important about their kids' education, and who would be awake right now that I could talk to about their kids' education?" And she was like, "Ugh." And she like looks over and she goes, "You know what? Emily, right down the street, she has a baby, and I know that baby wakes her up early, and she's got like 3 kids, and go talk to Emily." I was like, "All right, thank you." So I go to the second door. Emily answers wearing a bathrobe. She's got the 6-month-old baby, in her hand. And I said, "Hey, is it Emily?" She goes, "Yeah." I was like, "I was just talking to Miss Smith right down the street there, and heard you had 3 kids and are really into their kids' education, and only got a few minutes to spend with each person. You got a place we can sit down?" And she let me in, and she bought. Also, I overheard in the parking lot that there was actually 5 books instead of 3 books. And so I remember thinking, I'm just going to sell 5 books. I'm not going to do this whole 3-book thing, and which Roger probably loved that I, I wasn't doing anything that they told me to do. And so I showed her the 5 books, and told her how much it cost, and she said, I mean, it was the worst demo ever. Like I just pulled it out and I was like, "Yeah, it's 5 books. It's got math." And I just went straight to the math and was like, "It's pretty cool." And she was like, "Yeah, that is cool." And then I quasi had the close memorized, and so I just was like, it's great because I just take half down now and the other half at the end of the summer, and I could do credit cards, I could do cash. Which one would you rather? And she's like, "I'll just put this on a credit card." And I was like, "Sweet."
Done.
She just went and got the credit card. So.
And do you know that feeling of like that after your first customer, you're like, oh my God, it works. Like just the realization that you're actually,
Oh yeah. I
it's
mean, I was so naive. I just was like, "Of course, yeah, this everybody's gonna buy." It was just like,
wow. What does that teach us about success in sales? One, enthusiasm and kindness go way further than technical ability. Not
oh,
that it's that important, because you did have some technical ability to at least throw at the wall to see what stuck at the time. But enthusiasm and kindness go a long way, and then just sheer belief in the fact that what you're doing is good.
I think belief is the most powerful thing someone can have. I'll take someone with strong belief in what they're doing over skill or education any day.
Really?
Oh yeah.
That's good. Write that down. Oof. That's awesome, man. And then so your summer goes on. Are you aware? I mean, let me explain what I mean by this. My first summer, I didn't hit 6,000 units. I was like top 10, but I did sell 4,200 and I did hit PC and I had some big weeks relatively. But one of the I've always and I've said this before on the podcast, which is why I'm kind of paraphrasing this part, but one of the biggest things that helped me was nobody ever made a big deal about how much I was selling. Like I remember my first week we were doing our bar and Liz Brewer, she's like, "How many units did you sell?" And I said 282, and it was like the most in like the force. Like but she just goes, "Oh, cool." Like no big deal. And in my head, I'm like, "Oh, damn, I must have not done that great because she's not impressed." But I was working so hard. And so the whole rest of the summer, I just didn't care what anybody else was doing. Was that your mentality, or like how did you did you know you were going to be number one? Did you obviously at the beginning you didn't even think about it, I don't think, but how did that develop as I guess as you went along?
Yeah, funny enough, I actually did tell Roger that. So it kind of in the same conversation of him telling me that you need to stay for sales school, you can't get through your approach, you're not a fit for this. And then in that same conversation, he said, "Well, what's your goal for the summer?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be number one."
Yeah.
And so he just laughed and was like, "Okay, well, first you should probably memorize your approach to start with if you're going to be number one." And then it was interesting to really get into uh, with Roger how to do it. So I said, "Hey Roger, if I'm going to be number one, how do I do it? Like, what should I be thinking about? What should I do?" And he said, uh, there's three things. Number one, everybody else has a goal to work 80 hours. So if you want to be number one, you should work 85 hours. So I wrote it down and I was like, done. I'll work 85 hours. And he was like, number two, everybody else is going to do 30 demos. So if you want to be number one, you should do 35 demos. It's like, done. I'll do 35 demos. And he was like, number three, everybody else is going to be doing, was it 20 sit downs? And you need to get at least 20 sit downs. I was like, done. I'll get at least 20 sit downs. And if you go back and look at my canvassing chart, I pretty much was doing that.
Yeah. I have actually. Um who was it? Brandon Q. Somebody when I was selling books and we were trying to hit like bigger numbers, your canvassing charts are like your bar reports are out there somewhere. And like I could see you go back and see how many units, how many demos, how many sit downs you were having your record breaking summer. And it was, I mean, there was no getting around it. I mean, it was you were just seeing and doing the numbers. It was
Yeah,
incredible.
the record breaking summer, it was less focused on the 35 demos and more the 20 sit downs. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
was pretty consistent with 20 sit downs.
and you had permission. Anybody listening to this that's a first year that you just heard that don't get the 30 demos for you. You get permission to avoid demos once you've hit 10,000 units plus, and then you can figure out like
That, that actually,
before.
that's the same thing. I've said that as well. That's a good rule. Until you get to 10,000 units, focus on the demos, your attitude, and your schedule. Once you hit 10,000 and you're trying to hit 20,000, referrals, sit downs, and some technical things, packaging matters.
That's when you start tweaking. Yeah. And I do want to ask you and drill you with questions about your record breaking summer, but I do that you can't speak of that until we talk about how your second summer you come back and you hit 10,000 units, which is a pretty insane jump even from 6,200, but more than anything a pretty big number because for people who are listening who maybe they know Dustin, but you didn't know much about the Southwestern culture. Hitting 10,000 units was a benchmark of Hall of Fame type of like it's like winning a Super Bowl. Like you can't consider a quarterback one of the greats or even one of the top quarterbacks if they never won like a championship. Like there's like certain benchmarks in our culture in Southwestern that you're like, hey, this person hit 10,000 units. Or they became a DSM. That's another one. Or they recruited 20 people. That's another one. Those are like certain things. And so to give context to this part. So for those of us who sold books, we're all like, yeah, we know. But so you hit number one. Um, before, and so you're drafted Nashville back. How do you feel? I mean, did you know you were number one at this point, or were you like, holy cow, that was a crazy summer? We'll see how
Uh,
we did
which summer?
after the first one.
First one? No. So this was my first summer. Did I know I was number one?
Because it was tight,
Maybe,
like we said.
maybe, I, maybe I did. Uh, you know, I don't know. I do remember wanting to stay longer. So at some point, oh no. So I sold 10 weeks, and I think it was like 6,700 units, something around there. And then when I got to checkout, some random person walked up to me, said, "Man, 6,700 units in 10 weeks. Why didn't you stay a few more weeks and try to break the record?" And in checkout, I was like, "Wait a minute, there's a record?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's like 7,300 units." And because at my last week I hit more, and so I
You
was
would have
like,
done it.
"Yeah," I was like, and I didn't care about school. I was like, I
Yeah,
definitely would have stayed out there to make more
I
money. And
just made 40 grand.
yeah, yeah, like this is the coolest thing I've ever done. I genuinely had fun every day. Like I didn't have a single day where I thought it sucked. Like it was the most fun I'd ever had in my life. Like it was
Yeah.
awesome. So I would have stayed 4 more weeks my first summer for sure. Like I
Yeah.
was like, this is awesome.
Yeah. Football? I ain't got no football. My
Yeah,
knees or
this is,
whatever.
this
Yeah.
is easy. Nobody's hitting me. This is great.
Oh man. So that's wild. What was it like to go back to Roger and be like, I told you?
That's just not in my nature. Like that never occurred to me to even say that.
Sure,
Uh,
but it had to have felt like
I,
some
it
satisfaction.
literally wasn't on my radar. Like I was just
Wow.
like, I was so thankful that I mean, actually it was crazy because I hadn't been to University of Tennessee yet, so I went straight from checkout to go find a house to get signed up for classes. Like I didn't do anything you were supposed to do. So like I didn't have anything set up. I didn't have a house. I didn't have my class schedule. So like I literally went straight from getting my check at Southwestern and drove straight to Knoxville and was like, all right, I got to get everything going. We're having class start like next week, and so
Wow.
I don't remember the details, but I don't remember having any time to like think other than like, hey, we got to get going. Like I need to get to Knoxville was really all I was thinking about.
Wow. And then last question about your first summer that we can move on is when as you're starting to hit these big numbers there, um there's always a point I feel like in any even when you start hot that it clicks like you go you jump. Do you remember that moment or do you remember that instance where you're like this is for I'll give you an example. For me it was when I started doing my self-talk. I was hitting like 200 300 and it was fine and I was doing well and I felt good and having fun like you. But then one day I was like, you know what? I should probably be more coachable. These people talk about self-talk. I should start talking to myself. And it felt so weird, but I was like, screw it. I'll just commit to it. And if they're wrong and it doesn't work, then it's on them. And sure enough, that week, like 500, then 600, then 700. And I'm like, that was the moment that I was like, you know what? I'm just going to commit. And I know you were already committed, but was there anything else that happened that you went from like, oh, Emily with the barely know the sales talk to I'm hitting Mort? Like, when did that like turn on for you?
I would say there was two stories that specifically I can remember that was like a light switch where literally you could look at my units and it was like the next day that it went crazy. The first was my first summer going into week 5. Um, I didn't even know what President's Club was until I hit it, and
Yeah.
and they were like, "You hit President's Club," and I was like, "Great, what's President's Club?"
Yes.
and and so they told me all about it, and then I was like, "Is there any other clubs?" And they're like, "Yeah, there's more." I was like, "What's more?" And they said it's 1,000, and I was like, "Okay, like I'm gonna do that." So then my fourth week, I didn't hit it, and so I hit I don't even know it was like maybe 700 units, and I really tried hard. And I remember being deflated that week coming to the Sunday meeting, being like, "Man, I didn't hit my goal." I was all depressed, and um, they were like, "Well, have you been listening to any advanced sales?" And I was like, "What's advanced sales?" So uh, Amanda True gave me a dirty old bag of tapes, like old school cassette tapes.
2002, so I had cassette tapes in the
Oh,
car. That's
oh
right.
yeah, and it changed everything. And I was like, this is like gold. Oh my gosh! And it had Chat and Richie. It had Kaya. Kaya had a tape in
Mm,
there. Michelle Maloney, who's now
sure.
Michelle Broadbent, was in there, and Mort was in there. And so the next week, I put in the Mort tape and I played it, and it was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even remember hearing Mort in Cell School because I was probably asleep. And so I listened to it and I was like, now this guy has like what I need here. So I decided the entire week I was going to listen to Mort speech on repeat for the entire week. So there's the only thing that played in my car for the entire week was the Mort speech, and it came down to the very last. It was Saturday. It was like it wasn't the last. It was like Saturday at 4 o'clock, and I needed like 30 units to hit Mort, and it was just like one of those things. And it's always this way: when you really try to sell, no one buys, but when you're not trying to sell, everybody buys.
Yep.
And so I psyched myself out, and I knew I shouldn't have counted my units. It's like Kenny Rogers says, never count your chips while you're sitting at the table. But stupidly, I counted my chips while I was sitting at the table, and I don't know, for some reason I was goose egging, and I found this one garage sale. And I walked up to the lady, and she was really interested, but I just had way too much pressure. And she was like, "Yeah, I'm going to think about it." And I was like, "Lady, like, you got to buy this."
There goes the buying atmosphere.
Yeah,
Just
I was like, "No,
out the window.
we're throwing everything out the window here." And she was like, "Yeah, I don't know." And so I forgot what all I said, but somehow she had a set of golf clubs that she was trying to sell for like 150 bucks. I was like, "I'll tell you what, if you buy these books, I'll buy these golf clubs." And that way, there's a discount in here somehow. And she was like, "Man, you really want this?" And then I was like, "All right, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but there's this thing called Mort."
You told her? You explained it to her?
I was a stupid first year. I didn't know anything. And
Oh, that's so
so
funny.
she did. So she bought 30, it was like 35 units. And I still have the golf clubs
No
also.
way.
They're really cool. They're like wood, like old school wooden clubs. And that was my first time hitting more. So
That's epic, man.
yeah.
That should be like one of those clubs should be like a giveaway or something that we
Yeah.
like if we go, hey, we're gonna raise money for some charity of your choice, like to your charity, and we're gonna give away one of Dustin Hillis's Mort clubs.
Okay.
And then
Time for that. Yeah, that sounds great.
that'd be sweet. We've been actually trying to do that with the alumni network, is mobilize them to do charity work. It's a little harder than I thought it would be, but I think we should get orgs, quote unquote, in every city of alumni who are
Yeah.
kind of like the spearheads of it. And then whenever there's like something that happens in the world, Ukraine or Israel or whatever, the things that are happening right now, where it's like, hey, this charity's legit, and they're actually trying to help. We're gonna raise money. So Pat Roach's org in Chicago versus Steve Hurley, he's in Georgia and Atlanta. They're going to raise as much money as possible over the next month. Whoever wins, they get a dinner on us or whatever. And then we'll send that money over there or whatever. That's my goal. But stuff like this is cool. And you have like, those are legendary things that are special to you, but at the same time could be helpful to, incentivize people. I don't know.
Consider it done.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm a
I'm in.
fan. Thanks for that. We're in. If you guys are listening, we'll figure out. Keep an eye out on our Instagram to see how we're going to do that discount or that contest later. But anyway, that's so
Yeah.
awesome. Okay,
So then the second story was the year that I set the goal to sell 20,000 units and break the record. And it was my third week. And in order to sell 20,000 units in 14 weeks, you need to average 1,500 units a week.
yeah,
And my first week, it was like, I don't know, 1,100, 1,200 units, something like that. And then my second week, I went down to like 700. And so going into my third week, it was like I was so far off from averaging 1,500 units that it was like, kind of freaky, right? It's like, man, like I can't have this much of a delta and still hit 20,000 units. And so I had been talking to Kaya at the time and picking her brain. Um, and I called her on this particular Sunday and said, "Hey, I've got to go out here and like crush it." And she was like, "Okay, well, just call me each day and let's talk." And I was like, "Okay." And I remember at the time, Dave Brown also had the goal to break the company record. And so he was like kicking my butt going into week 3 because he was hitting 1,500 units like a machine. I mean, he's just a
He
machine.
is a machine. Yeah.
And
We've
so
had him on here too. You can feel his like clockworkness.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
no,
amazing.
it's amazing. And so I'm just sitting there thinking, man, like this guy's gonna. There's no way I'm gonna be able to do this. And so I thought, okay, I just need to beat him for a day. I don't think I had one day where I had beaten Dave in units. So I went out that Monday and I was like, all right, if I can just do this, I can prove to myself it's possible. And I gave it everything I had, and I had a 400 something unit day. I'd never had 400 units in a day. And I called my manager that night and I was like, hey man, and my first question, he said, "How'd you do?" I said, "Pretty good. I sold 400 units." He goes, "Wow, like that's your best day ever." And instead of being all excited, I stupidly was like, "Hey, how many units did Dave sell?" And he was like, I don't know. Let me check." And he came back and he's like, "Hey, yeah, you sold more than him today." And I was so excited. And I remember calling Kaya, and she answered the phone, and I said, "Hey, I got good news." She said, "What?" I said, "I sold 400 units today." And she was like, "Oh, cool, cool." And I was like, "And I beat Dave Brown." And she was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's interesting." And I was like, "Well, you don't sound too excited." And she was like, "Oh, what are you gonna have for dinner?" And I was like, "Okay, this is weird, but maybe she had a bad day." So then the next day I go out and I have even a better day. It's like 430 units. Go home, uh, call Roger and hey man, how was your day? Oh, I had 430 units, but hey, how did Dave do? And he's like, oh man, let me check. And he comes back and goes, man, I got bad news. Dave had like 450 units today. And here I am having my best day ever, and I was so focused on beating him that it was the whole saying, comparison's the thief of joy type of thing. And it's like, man. And so I called Kaya and I said, hey, she was like, how was your day? And I said, it was pretty good. I sold 400 units, but man, this guy Dave, he sold more than me, and he beat me. She goes, oh, okay, well, anyway, so what are you doing for the rest of the night? And it was like she didn't care at all. And I was like, man, okay, let's pause here. Like, how in the world are you thinking this way? And so I asked her. I said, hey, Kaya, I have 2 questions for you. Number one, what do you think like a really big day is? Like, what's a blow it out of the water day? And she goes, mm, probably 500 or 600 units in a day. And I was like,
Jeez.
uh, okay, that's why you're the record holder and I am not. Is I'm sitting here thinking 400 units is blown out of the water, and you're yawning as I tell you I sold 400 units in a day. And then the second piece was about this like competitive thing. And I said, hey, when you're out there, because Kaya not only broke the record, but she broke her own record.
Yeah, she did it twice.
She did it twice.
Yeah. And that's good context. Thanks for adding that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, and this was back when she would sell 18,000 units, and number 2 was like 10,000 units.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't close.
she didn't have someone out there. I think it was easier to do it the way that I did it, where I had someone pushing me, that I had to kind of like really have that competition or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. But I remember thinking, man, like, how did you do that? And she just off the top of her head said, well, it's easy. Every day I just do my dead level best and I compete with myself. And I know if I do my personal best every single day, that's good enough to be really big. And I was like, oh man, I am not thinking that way at all right now.
Wow. Just what if, and I'll fill in people in this context. The record, the first time like records started becoming important was when Bill Zizzy and Dave Rosen beat Michelle Maloney. That was like the first time someone was like, oh, we're going to try to break this record instead of just like going and doing our best. And then that was in 1989. And then there were several people who broke it after going forward. And then Kaya did it in like '01, I think. And then again in 2002. And then again. And it was banana. I mean, I think the closest somebody ever got to her when she was crushing it was Brian Wilson, sold 16,000. Right. I mean, that was like in 2001. And that was it. So then you're going into this and you're talking to her and she's like, 400, blah.
Yeah. And so it was setting the expectation in your mind. And I still do this to today. Setting goals and just saying you're going to do something is a powerful thing. So you have to be careful what your goal is because you might sell yourself short. And my goal was to sell 20,000 units, and I sold 20,000 units. Dave's goal was to break the company record, and he broke the company record.
Yeah.
I just sold a little bit more than him.
Yeah. You just checked out 15 minutes later.
and my goal was different. We had two different goals. Those are two different goals. And
Wow.
and so Kaya taught me that, and then the whole competing with yourself. So ever since then, I just said, you know what, I'm not gonna do this like comparison thing. I really am just gonna look in the mirror every day and say, did I do it? Did I give it my dead level best? Yes or not? Yes or no? And I can honestly say, for about 20 years, that I have given it everything that I have. I haven't held back any punches. I have left it on the field. For the people that have ever worked with me and the people that know me, you know, I go full throttle. I go full throttle every day, and that's the only speed that I know. And so
Wow.
when I think it goes back to that day where, because otherwise you're going at the speed of someone else versus the speed of your potential. If you go the speed of your potential, it'll blow your mind. And the very next week, actually, oddly enough, this shirt was the first week I sold 2,000 units. And at the time, no one in education had ever sold 2,000 units. So if I was competing with someone, there's no way I would have sold 2,000 units because no one had done it in education yet. And that's how I caught back up to break the record. Was I had to have multiple weeks at 2,000 units to do it, which I did.
Okay, so now I have so many questions about your record-breaking summer. Which, by the way, I appreciate what you said about full throttle, and I do have a question about how do you avoid burnout, but we'll get to that. Let's just talk a little bit, maybe some advanced sales here, and this could be related towards Southwestern, but we can also, I guess, tailor it to anybody who's in sales, who maybe is trying to like bust loose and just really, increase the production. But before you went into the summer, you started setting goals, you started figuring out, okay, 1,500 units. How much of that planning went into this summer? I mean, or was it more kind of like your first summer, you're like, okay, 20,000, I need to average 1,500. Let's see. Like what was the strategic plan for that for you?
Funny enough, it started with the thought, actually from Keith Kimball at the last day, my second summer, he shadowed me. And at the end of the day, I'd sold like 300 units. And I said, hey, man, what'd you pick up from the day? And this was Keith's 10th summer and my second summer. And he just shook his head and he said, you just had more units in a day than I've ever had in a day in 10 summers. And he said, you don't even know what's in these books. And he said, as soon as you start taking, which is true, I only do like 3 pages of the demo book. And so
that's the funniest thing.
and he said, if you take this job seriously and you really put effort into knowing like what you're doing, you're going to break the company record. And that was the first time the thought entered my head that I could break the company record. And I was like, that's an interesting idea. Maybe I should learn what's in these books and try to break the record. And so
product knowledge, people. First, step one.
Going into summer 3. So then also I just kind of same idea. Like if I'm going to do something, I'm going to go all in and really do it. And so I went back to school and I realized that the prior 2 years or 3, I was a business major. I was one credit short of a business minor. And my very first class that semester was Psychology 101. And they started talking about behavior profiles and the DISC profile. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is way more about selling and applicable things that I could use than my business classes.
Yeah.
So I changed my major to psychology, started reading books about behavior. I started buying just random books about cells. And I think I got like Jeffrey Gitomer's little red book of selling was kind of my first book.
Wow.
I bought Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within. I bought all the Zig Ziglar books, and I just started like consuming like, okay, what are all the things out there about how to be really good at selling? And then I took the sales talk, and I'd sit in the back of the room. So I would go to every single interview, even if I didn't have someone in the interview, to kind of like force me to study. And I would, and I had 2 years worth of advanced sales notes that I had taken. And then I had all these books that I had been reading. So I incorporated that into the sales talk. So I literally rewrote the sales talk, and I line by line would insert, like when Kevin Johnson would talk about the data approach, I actually hand wrote the data approach, and I would create like if then trees on the sales talk and say, if the dad answers, I say this. If the mom answers, I say this. If a grandparent answers, I say this. And I wrote all of this out and spent dozens and dozens of hours in the back of the room doing this. And then by the time the summer rolled around, I would practice the demos also with people. So I had it completely memorized by sales school. So, at sales school, you're supposed to do your 30 demos. So I had all the sales managers that were doing demos with me. And before I did a demo, because I had it really down by the time that summer started, I said, hey, instead of just like doing a demo, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of the customer you had last year that should have bought, but they didn't buy because of some reason. I want you to try to remember their name. And I want you to try to remember the objection they gave you. And I want you to just be that person. So be a very difficult person, but they probably should have bought, but they didn't. And so I had 30 people or 30 demos where that was the scenario that I did in sales school. And by the time I got done with sales school, literally like my last 5 demos, they were like, I have to buy. Like there's nothing, I don't have a reason not to buy. And I was like, I'm ready. And
wow.
And then that first week, then I went out and just started doing it.
Did you tell anybody besides Kaya that you were going to try to hit 20,000 units, or was it more like an internal goal that you're like, I'm just watch?
I didn't tell many people. Yeah, it was a very small group of people. I really only told people that could help me get there. So I think I told Kaya, Dave Brown. I think randomly I told Lester Crafton. Like he pulled me off to the side and asked me like, what's your goal? And I was like, well, I'm going to break the company record. And he looked at me and he goes, you will. And he like walked off. And I was like, okay, cool.
Isn't that amazing about book people that we do that to each other?
Yeah.
I've told the story before, but this is appropriate here to this. Is I'll never forget this. And I learned this lesson about what it is to believe in people, and at least the very importance of not shooting them down when they give you their goals, and even just how much that could go towards believing in them. So we had, I'll make this quick. My brother and I were hanging out at the Union somewhere. Mitch Johnson comes up to us. He's a book guy, and he was kind of looking bummed, and he wanted to run a half marathon. And he had told like his friends from his fraternity or whatever, and they were kind of like, dude, you've never been a runner. Like, what are you doing? You're an idiot. Like half a marathon. You never even ran 2 miles. Like, what are you doing? Like, he's just beat down. And he's like, I'm like, what are you moping about? And he goes, oh, just my friends. Like, I love Southwestern people because I always believe in you, right? Because and he tells us this story. And he gets done saying he was going to run a half marathon. And I look at Danny, and Danny looks at me, and then we look at him. And then Danny goes, half marathon? Why would you not run a full marathon? I was like, yeah, who runs a half marathon? I mean, if you're going to do something, you might as well do the full. Whatever. I guess if you want to run a half marathon and be mediocre, but whatever. And then we didn't say anything else. And he looked up and he goes, I should run a full marathon. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, now he's ran like Ironmans and stuff like that. But just that aspect of book people to just believe in each other and pump each other up in ways that it's like, hey, you think 10 is big, kind of like what Kaya did to you, 400, dude, 600. You
Yeah.
know, it's such a weird community that we do that to each other for. And it's really cool to have. I think that's part of the aspect that I missed the most about it during that time of my life was just after I left, nobody was that for me anymore. Nobody was telling me, hey, you're bigger than that even. And it was a cool blessing to have at the time. It's
Yeah.
really cool. Wow, man, that's so awesome. So you went out and you crushed it. You broke the record. What did it go down to the wire, or were you like ahead of schedule, or how did you?
No, my last week, and this was back when you had to do it in 14 weeks. And
Right.
so my week 14, I had to sell over 2,000 units. And I had run out of turf. I was selling in these really small towns in Texas. And so I went to a new territory, no names, cold turkey, and
Jeez.
started new turf that last week. And I had my best week ever. I sold 2,600 units
Yeah.
week 14. And that's what did it. And
And I think that Thursday you had like five. I remember this because I remember studying your charts. You like, yeah, that Thursday you had like 500 something, and I'm like, what in the world?
yeah, no, I really got I went to Liberty, Kansas. So I actually went to a different state and found this little gem of a community. And my very first customer was like the car dealership guy that had the power name and then just like
Awesome.
dominoes. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, were you selling like big pack? I mean, was it just a bag every time, or because there's like stories, and I'm getting people make up. In Southwestern, people are so funny because they make up like legends and stuff. So I got to verify which myth is true. But there were stories of you going, all right, you put 400 units in the trunk of your car. You're like, I'm not coming home until these are gone. Was that like the mentality, or how did you?
I did carry a lot. So I did cash out a lot of people, and I did figure out that a key for me is actually selling all 14 weeks and not doing a delivery week. So early on, this was back before it was common practice. Chris Adams used to fly me in to train all the Estonians. And one day I said, hey, some people ask me not to really tell the truth of what I really did. It's like,
Yeah.
do you want me to really teach your people what I did, or do you want me to give the watered down version? And he goes, no, let it rip. Tell them everything. Don't hold anything back. So I taught referrals. I taught how to do deliveries, how to deliver 100%, do payment plans, and get check. Back then, we were getting checks, and they'd be post dated checks. And I had a stamp on the back of the check that I would do for collections. And you just figure it out, and like all entrepreneurs do. When you have a big goal, you do whatever it takes to hit that goal. And um, so yeah, so I was about after week 2 or week 3, getting massive amounts of books shipped to me, and then I would just fill up the car. But it wasn't like what I was selling that day. I mean, I put several days worth of books in my car and really load that sucker down, and then
Good thing Kansas is flat.
yeah, yeah. And I had a truck. I had a truck with a hard top back to it, so I literally had the back of a truck full of books ready to go, and I just cash everybody out. But no, when I was hitting my stride, a goal was like one bag a day, but it didn't happen that way. I mean, it was probably a bag every other day, and then you know. I mean, you do the math. My average package size was probably 36 units. I think was what it was.
Mm.
So it was pretty normal. But you'd have several starter sets at 30 units, and then you'd have several 60 units, and then back then I think the bag was only 100. It's like 100 units. So
Hmm.
however that worked out.
Wow. Yeah, because when we had Dave on here and he talked about that summer too, and his was more like machine gun. He broke the record for the most customers, right? He had like 1,000 customers or whatever.
Yeah, he was actually going door to door, and I was working referrals. So
Yeah, which
I
is
did not just go to the next door. I waited till I knew they were home. I had a name. I had information about them. So mine, if I was going down a street, I'd go to this house and that house and that house and that house. But I was still on the same street. I wasn't going across the neighborhood. I was just being strategic about when I showed up at the house and not just knocking on a door if I didn't know they were there.
But did you have dead time? I'm sorry, I'm getting so technical about this, but it's so fascinating. Like, did you have dead time during the day? Because like sometimes people were just weren't home. Like, how did you?
I was so it was the first part of the day was typically appointments. So from 7:30 to like 9:30 were appointments, and I got really good at setting appointments. And they were solid. Like they were there, they were expecting me, set up appointments. And then from 9:30 till 11, I would work referrals, and I'd go to my hottest names that I had the most information on. Then from 11 to noon, I would cold call, and I would actually go open up new turf. And usually I wasn't trying to sell anybody. I was just trying to get information. So I loved from 11 to noon finding the old person, and they'd tell me where all the kids are on the
Ma
street.
Bell.
Yeah, and so it was really mapping, but sometimes I'd accidentally get a customer from 11 to noon. And then at noon typically was an appointment, and I'd do a lunch appointment. And then from noon to 2, I would open up more turf. So again, that was like work. But for me, it was mapping. Somebody bought, they bought, but all I needed was information. And then around 3, I would turn back around and start working referrals based on the information I had. And then by 5 o'clock, I'd work gravy. And usually by 7 o'clock, I was back into my appointments, and I do appointments from 7 to 10.
Wow. That's wild, man. What a schedule. And it's such a different way to skin the cat, right? Because Dave was literally like selling to grandparents. I mean, it was just like
Oh,
everybody could
I
buy.
saw the grandparents too, but I would know the grandparents' name. I'd know how many grandkids they had, and someone would say, "Hey, you ought to sell that grandparent down the street," and I would go do it.
How cool, man. That's wild. So you get back to Nashville and you know you got it. I mean, you because the units have been delivered, the cash has been collected. So you know you got 20K.
I knew I had broken the record. What I didn't know was how many units Dave sold.
So you call Roger, hey Roger.
Well, Roger gave me the idea of just waiting till Dave checked out and then turning in my units after he did.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I was gonna ask you about that moment because that's also another legendary moment from that 2004 summer was that you guys checked out within a few minutes of each other, right? It was like
Yeah, no, I was really good with my bookkeeping. Like I was always on into the details of my business ever since my first summer. Like
and
I
like can we
always did that.
Can
And
we,
so
yeah, can we pause that before you continue about that checkout story? If there is anything as important as at if any, especially for first years or people who are still second, third summer listening to this, if there's anything you've written down to really understand how to hit these kinds of numbers, the basics is you got to have a good if you're running your business you got to have your books in check. There is nothing more tragic as a person who I kept my stuff together too, so my checkouts were pretty relatively smooth. There's nothing more tragic than someone who on paper sold 10,000 units but it checks out with 7,500 because they're like numbers or think are a mess. And even now it's easier because you have an iPad that can basically do all of that for you. There's still people who still don't have those in check. And so if you're learning anything from this besides, big packages or whatever, is what you just said, which is if you had messy stats, no way you hit 20K. Like no, not even I mean you could have sold the 20K, but like checked out with 20K, different story because that is such a common thing. So if you're listening, underline, highlight that what you just said. Sorry, go on.
well,
Check
and
out.
how you do one thing is how you do everything. So and it's you're forming the habits now that you're going to have forever. So if you see yourself as a successful business person into the future, if you see yourself as being a CEO or an entrepreneur, then form those habits now. And I don't know many super successful CEOs that don't have some element of managing their business properly. And so if you start now treating yourself as if you're going to be running $100 million company one day, then that's the right attitude to have.
That's cool. Yeah, write that down. Okay. So back to this checkout. So you get to checkout and Dave's checking out. How did that go down? Because I've heard of this moment, but I've never really asked you or him.
So I mean, I don't remember it being that big of a thing. Just Roger was like, "Hey, I'm pretty sure that you sold more." but why don't you like wait and see? And I was like, whatever. So I probably, went and like hung out, and I don't even remember what I did. And then Roger came up to me and was like, all right, Dave just checked out. Let's go turn in your units. And I was like, all right. And went and turned them in. And
But you knew at this point because
oh, I knew. I knew I had 20,000 units.
he
Uh,
had 19.8 or something, right? So he was close.
I don't remember what it was, but yeah, it was within a few hundred. I think I had 20,300, and his was 19,000 something.
Close.
I don't
I mean,
remember.
for you guys, it was like a day of work with what you guys were doing, but it was a couple
Yeah,
days of work.
yeah, it was, and so
There it is.
yeah, that was
It
it.
was 85 hours.
I mean, by that point, it was just like, you know, I did my best, and if he beat me, he beat me, and I'd already mentally let go of all the caring about it, and it was like I hit my goal. I had 20,000 units, and if he had a little bit more, then good for him. And I really did feel that way at that point.
That's amazing. So after 20, why did you go back for number 4 to Alaska? Just did you try to beat it again, or was it just like, eh?
Actually, I thought I was done. I got engaged to Kaya shortly thereafter, and wanted to start a coaching consulting business. And this was before I knew I was even going to do it with Southwestern. And so I started creating a business plan, and was talking with Rory Vaden about starting the company. And um, all of a sudden, I get a random phone call from Jerry Heffel, and he is such a great leader, probably one of the greatest mentors that Southwestern's ever had. And I
Yeah.
love Jerry. He's awesome. And he says, hey man, I hear you think you're done with selling books. And I said, yeah, I'm starting a training company. Actually, I was starting it with Kaya. So Kaya and I were actually the original people that were starting the company for what ended up becoming Southwestern Consulting together. And he goes, yeah, that's great. If you were to come back for one more, because I was still in school, I still had one more semester. So I got married in December, but I didn't graduate till May. And so
Oh,
he was like, "Yeah, if you're gonna, get married and all that, like you should probably graduate college first before starting a company. I mean, starting a company while you're still going to school is kind of hard." I was like, "Yeah, I thought about that, but I think this is what I want to do, and I don't have anything else to prove. I kind of have checked all the boxes that I wanted to check." And he said, "Well, if you were to come back, uh, where would you want to sell? If you could sell anywhere in the country, where would you want to sell?" I was like, man, if I could sell anywhere in the country, I'd probably sell in Alaska. That's my favorite place I've ever been. And he goes, what if I give you the entire state of Alaska with you and Kaya? No one else will be there. Y'all can have the whole state, and y'all just have a money summer, make a ton of money before your wedding. Would that be something you'd be open to? And I was like, shoot, the whole state of Alaska? That sounds pretty cool. And he said, yeah, you'll have a blast. You can still, take that money and go start your coaching consulting business. And so I called Kaya, and she thought she was done as well. She thought she was going to be a DSL and got passed up on a promotion, and she was kind of bummed. And she was like, "I'm out," And so,
yeah.
um, she also said, I will, yeah, sure, what the heck, let's do it." So she sold. We doubled the price of the books, and she sold 6,000 units, and I sold like 13,000 units. And we were back then making, I think, $8 profit per unit.
Which is what it is now.
Yeah, which is what it is now. But again, going back to the Chris Adams story, I told his team that, and they're like, "Wait, we can change the prices of the books." And so,
Here we go.
yeah, and that's when they started figuring out like what people would actually pay, and they changed their prices, and
Yeah.
uh, and so that was all from me flying over to Estonia,
Wow.
teaching them how to do that. So
Wow. Dang. Okay. Well, one last question, and then we go to the rapid fires and then a ponytail, if that's cool.
sure.
Um, when you look back now, because Peter Petkoff now broke your record that stood for almost 20 years. When you look back and someone hits 30,000, what do you think of that? Like, how did that? I mean, obviously you let go of it, and records are meant to be broken. I think you and Dave had a whole uh, advanced sales about specifically that idea of like, we just set the record, but somebody's going to come along and break it. But did you think that it was going to be 22,000, just barely, or like when you saw that 30,000 come back in your head, what, to someone who the record was held for so long, what was that like for you?
Well, I mean, my first coaching client ever was Theo Davies, and that's when I fell in love with coaching. And he sold 19,000 units. He had like a 700 unit day, and he had a week that was like 2,800 units. And uh,
Wild.
and he should have sold 20,000 units. It was like some weird, respect thing that is the reason he didn't break the record. And I got more satisfaction out of coaching Theo how to break the record than me personally breaking the record. And that's when I decided to start Southwestern Consulting. Um, and then Peter, when I became CEO of Southwestern Family of Companies, my favorite thing was working one on one with Southwestern book people, and just being able to sit down with Peter Petkoff. And I think we were in Colombia, and he had a good. I think he had sold 10,000 units, and he was doing the same thing that most people do. Kai and I are sitting by the pool, and he comes up and he was like, "I'm going to get you a cigar, and if you will smoke this cigar and let me ask you a bunch of questions, I'll buy you a cigar." And I was like, "You don't have to do that, but sure." So he goes and gets me a cigar, and he's sitting there, taking notes. And he said, "Well, what do you think?" I forgot what the question was about. What do you think is possible, or what do you think? Do you think you did your best? Do you think you could have worked harder? There's some question like that. And Kai and I both had already like had this conversation, and looking back at our own stats and remembering how we felt, and remembering like thinking like what could we have done? And 30,000 was the number. Is like we both have felt like we could have sold 30,000 units, and that if we had to do it all over again, it was possible. And actually we had done the math, and like we could empirically show that 30,000 was doable, not like a stretch, like it was totally
Yeah.
doable. So we shared that with Peter, and he wrote it down, and got like real quiet. He got like real serious, and he goes, "Man, like this is intimidating." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Well, now I feel like the only thing I can do is 30,000 units, or I'm not doing enough." And then we both looked at him and we're like, "Well, yeah, that's probably true."
Yeah. You, you suck if you don't do this. No, no, not quite like that, but yeah.
And I'm trying to think. I think he had already, because there was another conversation with Peter where I challenged him to sell. I think it was the 10,000 unit summer. I bought him a hockey. I took him to his first NHL hockey game, and he
Yeah.
said that was like he put it up on his dashboard or whatever, and it was like 10,000 units to go to a hockey game, and he did it, and it was like, man, if this kid can do that in his second summer, this guy can break the company record. So kind of took him under my wing, and started coaching him up, and giving him probably more advanced sales than the typical person. But he had already sold 10,000 units, and he was ready to hear some of the
Next level.
referrals, and the
Yeah.
time management, and that system that I just shared of, how to set appointments, and how to really do some of those things. And Kaya was sharing the same stuff. That's all the stuff she did too. And I wasn't surprised at all. It was fun seeing it, and witnessing it happen, but no, it wasn't shocking whatsoever. It was like, yeah, this is right.
Makes sense.
This is what it should be. I was just surprised it took someone that long to do it. It was like, man, that was a
Yeah.
long time for 20,000 units to be a record. And I think that people just, again, it goes back to belief, right? Like people have to believe it's possible. And as soon as Emil believed he could do it, he did.
Yep.
And then once Emil did it, and isn't it interesting that everybody that did it since were all on Emil's team because they all had that belief. It wasn't like, oh, they're technically better. They believed they could do it, and then they did.
That's exactly right. Man, that is so cool. Yeah, I had Peter, I hosted him for a little bit this last summer. And so he was here in my house and stuff. And it was just kind of just talking to him about like, how did you do that? Because, you know, he was telling me. And his mentality is just so high. Like his conviction on it is so high. Like he would tell, he's like, I only sell bags. So I'm like, oh, okay. So like how many? He was, oh, 2 or 3 a day. I'm like, oh, cool. Like just whatever to him, but to him it's just so nonchalant and kind of like what you were saying with Kai. It's just like, yeah, it's just the level of belief he's at because he can. It's bananas, man.
Belief is the most important thing.
Man, there that's a theme right there. It's just belief. The theme of your every episode I try to find like a common thread, and it's just like, hey, believing that you can, and then just committing to it completely. So cool. Oh man. Well, I guess the last question. Sorry, I lied to you. I do have one more question and then rapid fire. And because I hinted at this earlier, but earlier you said you went full throttle all day every day, but then you always hear people talking about like, hey, make sure you have good balance and make sure you don't get burnout because if you don't, you know, for pushing 100% all the time, it could like lead to like, you know, some sort of like sustainability issue. How do you like maintain that full throttle without going bananas? You know, because sometimes that could be a risk that people could face.
A powerful vision. Your vision has to be stronger than the obstacles that you're facing. And when you're operating out of your sense of purpose, for me, it was my purpose in life. Like I felt God put me on this earth to help people reach their potential. And if that's my purpose of being on this earth, first I have to figure out what my potential is and prove I can achieve my potential. And then once I figure out what does that even feel like, what does that look like, and how do you do it, that's the only way you can teach other people how to do it. So for me, it was like a life calling. It was like, hey, I'm literally doing the thing that I'm put on the planet Earth to do, which is help people achieve their potential. And so I'm going to give it everything I've got because I'm doing the thing I'm supposed to do. I think that people get sideways when they let their ego come into the picture and they're doing it for the wrong reasons. So if someone's, you know, just doing it to win an award, they're doing it to make money, they're doing it to just like say, hey, look at me. They're doing it to someone just told them to, or they don't have a purpose. If someone doesn't have a vision, someone doesn't have a mission, someone doesn't have a compass guiding them. You know, I've read this super interesting book where I'm trying to remember the name of it. It'll come to me. And so what it talks about is that in the Bible, the demigod Bel, which is actually the root of Satan, has the root in more. The thing that Bel hooks people on to draw them away from God is to set a goal based on more. And that like really was interesting because I know so many people who are out there and their goal is just simply more for the sake of more. And that's a scary place to be, is if the reason you're doing what you're doing is just to get more of something. That goes back to Bel and what the Old Testament God was that people worship, the old cow. If you guys think of Old Testament and Moses, and he goes down and he breaks the tabernacle over his knee, they were worshiping Bel, the golden calf. And ironically, that calf is the same image used for the stock market. So if you really want to get philosophical here, what's the goal of the stock market is more. The goal of most businesses is more. And I don't like that. Like if a company is setting a goal just to be more and to just grow for the sake of growing, that's not inspiring. And that doesn't drive you, and that will burn you out. And I think people receive burnout when someone gives them a goal that's like, hey, go be the biggest, be the best. And the reason for it is just because I said so, because it's more. Um,
Mm,
that equals burnout. That does not inspire people. That does not cause someone to work with passion every single day. That that burns people out. It's just I'm doing it for more.
yep.
But if your vision is so clear, your passion is so focused, and you understand your calling for your life, and you're operating out of your calling, you're not working. You're having fun. You're just doing the thing you're supposed to do. It's like breathing. And anything I do, that's what I choose to do is I focus on the things I feel called to do. And when that happens, it's easy to give it everything you've got, to be all in, to not hold back, because you only live once. And if you're if you're actually fulfilling the purpose of why you're on the planet Earth, then you should give it everything that you got every single
Mm,
day.
amen to that. You have things that people who want more don't have, which is enough. And that's easy then to give all of you for something that's good enough for you. And
it,
that's
it
great.
goes back to your identity. If your identity is in your work, and I've met people who have said things like, "Man, my identity is my work. I have nothing else besides my work, and this is all I care about. This is my identity. This is all I want to do, and forever." It's just like,
Mm,
man, that's sad. It's like your identity should not be in what you do. Your identity, for me, is just in God and Jesus, and that's it. And from there, everything else doesn't matter. So you can have peace, you can have perspective, um, you can have the craziest circumstances in the world happening to you, but if you know you've got God, you don't need anything else. So you can have it. The Bible says peace that passes understanding, and it's like that's what it is everybody else looks at what's happening to you and they think, man, you must be upset, you must be mad, like how can you handle all these things? And it's like, no, it doesn't really matter. It's just like on to the next thing, on to the next whatever. So whether it's getting a no selling books, whether it's a really bad thing happening in your personal life, something happens in your career, something happens at work, something happens with your health. It's like, man, all those things are tough. Life is tough, but the perspective is what matters. And knowing your identity and who you are, that's all that matters.
hmm.
That keeps you going.
Mic drop. Let's go to the. We're just gonna leave that there and go to some rapid fire questions. So good, dude. Was it? Is it? Oh, by the way, is it called "The Lord of the Heavens Calling Down Great God of Canaan"? I just
Oh, let me think here.
That's the first book that.
Kingdom of Heaven.
Oh, okay. Well,
Uh,
there you
let,
go. Check it out. Usually, what we need to start doing is putting in the descriptions when people put in the when people bring up a book, put those books in the description. It's like because you mentioned another couple books that you picked.
Google Kingdom of Heaven and Kingdom
Let's see.
Kingdom of God. Oh, God. No, it has the word God in it. Kingdom of Gods. Maybe Kingdom of Gods.
Kingdom of Gods, uh, by
Purple.
N.K. Jemish. Nah, we'll find it when we get it. We'll put it on the description below
Yeah,
so people can.
yeah. I have it at home. Dang it. Yeah, we'll find it though.
Okay, and then I'll put it on the description below so people can go read that.
Okay.
All right, man. So now we're gonna go into our rapid fire questions. So these are just like it doesn't mean we have to answer them quick. It's just like whatever comes to mind. Because sometimes you don't worry about like, oh, my baby, this was my favorite thing. You just whatever the first thing that comes to your mind. Share with us this, and um, we'll just kind of go through them. So you sold 4 summers. What was your favorite territory that you sold in? As in like the state
Alaska.
had to be. I figured that was gonna be.
Alaska was amazing. It was
I
so.
can't imagine. Did it
I
ever
mean,
get dark?
I've traveled a lot, and Alaska is my favorite place in the world. I go. My goal is to go every year, so I've gone 2 years in a row. This next year will be my third year to do a guys fishing trip in Alaska, and it's the coolest place in the world.
Wow. Are there alumni up there? A lot of alumni up there?
I don't know.
Probably not, right? As many book kids
Yeah.
go through Canada. Okay. Favorite kind of turf to sell in. So it's like country, big brick country, low income country, suburbia.
Yeah, probably wealthy, con- uh, condensed country.
That's the sweet
So
spot, isn't it?
yeah, just people that have money that are out there in the country,
And connected. The country people know
and
each other well.
they aren't spread apart. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like the really nice neighborhood in the country.
Yeah. By the way, territory matters unless you know how to work every territory. This is something we've discussed here before. It's like if you don't know how to work that turf, you got to figure it out, and then it won't matter. So if you
Yeah.
don't want,
No,
if you
my
don't,
first summer, I worked the dregs of of turf, and I sold almost 7,000 units. So
yeah, it's doable. Wait, so wait, where did you go your first summer? I don't think I.
it was McDonald County, Missouri. So if you look at the state of Missouri, the bottom corner of Missouri, I had a day where I accidentally went into Bentonville, Arkansas, and my names list, I had like 5 people in a row that worked at Walmart. And I was like, why does everybody work at Walmart? And they were like, do you know where you are, son? And I was like, apparently I don't. And I'd accidentally, the road dipped down into Arkansas. So yeah,
That's
uh,
awesome.
yeah.
And then your second summer, you went where?
Tyler, Texas.
And then you their third
West
summer.
Texas, and I was out in all these little cow towns,
Yeah,
West Texas, Hereford, Dalhart, Dumas, Canyon, Snyder, San Angelo, Texas.
the whole area. Because that's third summer, you were like in that strip where Oklahoma's barely Oklahoma, right? That's where you're able to skip into Kansas.
Yeah, I went all the way up to Dalhart, and then Liberty, Kansas is like, or Liberty or Liberal, Kansas is up there, close to Texas.
All right. Okay. Cool. Cool. What was your favorite advanced sales tape?
Mm.
And why is it Bill Zizzy?
Uh, that was a good one. Trying to think. My favorite advanced sales tape was probably
There's so
it was
many to
probably
pick.
Kaya's. I think Kaya's was the best, and so hers was amazing.
I
So
haven't heard it. That's a new one.
yeah, she talks a lot about belief and doing your personal best. Like a lot of the things that really were breakthroughs for me, she has on her advanced sales tape.
Love that. Okay. Favorite HQ. The
You know,
memories just start rolling back.
My HQs were bad.
Dude, okay, while you think of this, Emmy Brown.
I lived in a halfway house my second
Yeah.
summer.
So Emmy Brown, I recorded, I think that was the last person I recorded with you. And she said that she flew out to see you to follow you because you were crushing it. And she just ended up laying down on the pile of clothes for a bed. And she like the next morning when the sun coming through, she's like, what the heck are these guys doing? There was like a bunch of dudes just living there, and it was just a
Oh
mess.
yeah. No, we had bunk beds in the room. So she was in a room with 4 other dudes, and she was in on a couch with dirty clothes on it. And there was a fish tank above her that had they weren't piranhas, but they looked like piranhas, and it was all dirty. And it was a halfway house. It was not what I recommend.
Good
So
times. Good. Well, I'll just say that one.
that makes it obvious that you don't have to have a really good HQ to have a successful summer, but it sure does help. So
It's
uh,
easier to come back to your own bedroom and cook
yeah, it
meals.
causes you want to sell more. Like I didn't want to go home because our HQ was so bad. So I was
Oh,
like,
it's
I need to
10:30.
stay here as cheap as I can.
It's 10:30. I gotta go. I have to have another appointment somewhere.
Who else is gonna buy?
Oh man. Did you have a favorite breakfast spot?
No,
Not one of those. Okay, we'll
I
skip.
mean, no, I was so focused on my customers and filling out my order forms and looking at my map. Uh, I mean, I was like, at the moment I opened my eyes, it was like go mode, and I was always the first person in the shower. I was always the first person to get my breakfast, and it was more just sustenance. It wasn't like I was there to enjoy myself. And I was looking through my names list. I would rewrite my names list at breakfast every day. I would look through all my maps and I would transfer my referrals onto my physical map every single day. And I would map out every street I was going to go on and the order in which I was going to go. And I would do all of that at breakfast. So I didn't even pay attention. I don't even remember any of my HQs or my breakfast spots because I was so
You're
focused.
in the zone. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Your favorite follow date, whether that be somebody followed you or you followed somebody.
Oh man, it had to be when Kaya followed me. My was it in Alaska? At one time, Kaya followed me, and a bird pooped on her, and it was so funny. And she was so embarrassed. And we got in the door, and she had to get all cleaned up. And it was back when we were dating, so she was like, "All oh shoot, I guess got a bird poop on me." And so it was just so much fun, and yeah, I really enjoyed having her follow me.
That's a good story. I love that. We'll have to have Kaya on here, by the way, at some point if she's open to
Oh
stuff.
yeah,
It'd be
she's
so
great.
fun.
She's doing some exciting things. She has a new real estate company, doing investments and real estate development, and yeah, she would love to be on there.
Yeah, we'll invite her next. Okay. Favorite off schedule story, if you had one. It doesn't sound like you probably had any off schedule stories, but
Oh no, in Alaska we were off schedule. It just got to where it was just like, my very first day in Alaska with no names, no pre-approach, it was like 450 units my first
that's
day.
so wild, man.
And I came home and Kaya was like, "How was your day?" And I was like, "Oh, it's pretty good, 450 units." And she was like, "It's a solid first day." And I was like, "Yeah." And so then the next day, we both go to work and come home. And I was like, "Hey, how was your day?" She was like, "Oh, it was all right." I was like, "What'd you do?" And she was like, "Oh, 430 units." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And she was like, "So this is how it's going to be." And so, uh, but then probably around week 5, uh, I mean, we were selling a lot. We were, having 2,000, almost 2,000 unit weeks, but we had doubled the price of the book. So it was equivalent to 4,000 units back then of profit. And so we would go to the movies, and it would be like, "Hey, if we sell X amount by, this time on Saturday, let's go see a movie." So we would hit like 1,500 units and then go see a movie.
Oh, casual. I did that too. No big deal. I remember when I did that. It was awesome. No, I sold 0 units my 3rd summer, and then I would go to the movies. That was how I coped with my failure. But it's okay. This is about you. It's not about me. That's a fun story though. Okay, favorite sales day. Now, this could be because you had the biggest day. It could be like your 500 unit day or whatever, or maybe you sold 0 but you learned something important, that dirt pile day or something like that. Like, do you have a day where you go back and like, man, that was a great day in the book field. It meant a lot.
Well, most people have heard the tick story, but one day I got completely covered in ticks, like hundreds of ticks, and so I wanted to quit. It was crazy. There's a big long story attached to it, but I decided not to quit, and it just so happened that my parents were in Hawaii, my friends were in Mexico. So the Sunday before, my mom had sent me a coconut that said "Wish you were here" from Hawaii, which is like
Nice.
the worst
Not
thing you could do on the book.
why would you do that?
Yeah, my mom. Remember my mom and Keith and that whole story of not hearing the parent talk. Well, she sent me a coconut from Hawaii, and then my buddies called me from Mexico, and they're like, "Dude, Mexico's the coolest thing ever." And then like that next Monday, my car's breaking down, getting all these flat tires, and I get just completely covered in ticks. And I wanted to quit. And I was like, "Man, I don't care how much money I'm making. This is stupid." And I remember that moment of being in the gas station and having drugs in my sock and telling myself I'm not going to quit no matter what. And I'm going to give it everything that I've got. And so I pulled out a razor and I shaved all the ticks off. And when you throw ticks into a sink, it looks like hair, but then it crawls off.
Ugh. I'm glad that you know that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I know that because you knew that. You know what I'm saying? I didn't find that out from experience. I'm glad your experience taught me now.
Yeah. And so
Oh,
So yeah, so that was a super important day. Not my best day, obviously, but after not quitting and having that experience, I knew there was nothing that I was going to face that was going to cause me to even think about quitting.
Wow, that's a great answer. I thought that might have been your ponytail. But we still have one story that we have to hear from you that you enjoy. So think about that
Oh,
as we talk about the last one. Here's the last rapid fire question: Is did you? And sometimes this is a no, but who was the most famous person that you ever met when you were knocking on doors? And some people don't have anybody. So if you don't, if you can't
yeah,
think of anybody, that's fine. But
I
every
don't
once in a while,
I mean,
can't
shoot.
imagine Texas is full of celebrities.
Yeah, I probably sold to a few billionaires, but I don't even
Yeah,
nobody would know 'em, you know.
yeah. That's cool. I only ask because every once in a while you get that person that's like, Tom Cruise's cousin or something. I don't
Yeah,
know. Like,
I don't think I had anything like that. So
that's fair. All right. Well, this brings us to the moment where we do our ponytail. That's the name of the show. And of course, people who sold books know why we call it ponies. Because we were all ponies, right? To do this job. At the end of the day, we were the ultimate buyers. But it's a time where we ask our guests to think of a story that really impacted them during their time during Southwestern. And it could be sad, it could be funny, it could be a little bit of both, it could be inspirational, it could just be something ridiculous that happened, which, as we know, is the book field is full of those things. So at this point, take it away, my friend Dustin Hillis's ponytails.
this story really has to do with not judging a book by its cover, and still to today, I think of this is I had a certain week where I started judging houses based on how they looked, and I would literally look for the shiny toys and the fancy cars, and if they looked like they had money, I would stop, and if it looked like they didn't, I'd just skip the house, which was sad because the reason I was there was to help parents with their kids' education, regardless of how much money they had. And so this particular house, I wasn't really paying attention. I'd already gotten out of my car. And as I was walking to the door, I noticed that the swing set was all rusty and the kids' toys were like dirty and broken. The flower bed was not kept. Um, there was like trash in the yard. And I was like, oh, what am I doing? And the house just looked dingy. So I was already there and I'd already rang the doorbell. And I just had this thought like, this is a complete waste of my time. So I turned around and after I rang the doorbell, I literally walked back to my car and was just hoping that they would like not answer or they would answer and like just close the door real quick. So I'm getting back to the car and I hear this voice behind me going, hey, hey, young man, what do you want? What are you doing at my house? And I was like, oh, shoot, she's going to call the cops. I got to turn around. And
Yeah.
so I turn around and sure enough, it's what I expected. It was a lady wearing a wife beater, jeans with holes in it. Her hair was like all crazy and messy. And I was like, oh, yeah, you probably wouldn't be interested. I'm selling books door to door. They're super expensive. And she goes, books? I love books. Could I see your books? And I was like, oh, this is such a waste of time. This is just like, what am I doing? But sure. And I was like, and there was a old rusty bench, and I was like, let's just sit on the bench. I'll show you real quick the books. And she was like, yeah, yeah, okay. So she sits down. I sit down. I immediately pull out my book. I don't follow any of the sales talk. I hand her the book, and I said, yeah, it's got math and science, and the formulas are in there, and she goes, oh, math. I love math, and oh, look at these formulas. And she's like flipping through it, and I was like, yeah. And she goes, so like, how do I buy these? And I was like, well, and I just opened the slick and I said, it comes as a set. It's it's all these kids books, all these CDs, and everything. And for the whole bag, it's $1,200. And she goes, oh, okay. Do you take credit cards? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, okay, hold on 1 second. And she goes inside, she gets her credit card, she comes back out and she goes, hey, do you have any more books? And I was like, well, there's these blue books. They're called the volume library, and I don't have any pictures of them or anything. And she goes, how much are they? And I was like, I think they're like $500. And I just like made up the price. And she was like, oh, wow, okay. And so she just said, can I get those too? And I was like, sure. And I just wrote her up, and she paid in full. And I went and got the books out of my car and like gave them to her right there on the spot, and her credit card went through. And then I called Roger, and I was like, "Hey, I just sold some volume libraries. I hope $500 is enough to cover it." And he was like, "Yeah, what the heck are you doing?" I was like, and I told him the whole story. And
Wow.
so it was for the longest time, that was my biggest customer I'd ever had, and it was the worst demo I'd ever given in my life. And it totally taught me the lesson to not ever judge a book by its cover.
Gosh, I love that story. And you know what's beautiful about that story? Every book person has had something like that happen. And it maybe really highlights how cool it is that we did this thing in college that taught us so much. Like what a valuable lesson to learn. As what were you, 18, 20?
Oh man, yeah, I was probably 19. Yeah.
I mean, to learn that lesson in that powerful way at that point in time in your life, it changes a person. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing, man. Wow. Thank you for sharing. Dustin, this has been a blast, man. I'm glad that you came and hopped on the podcast and shared some time with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate you and everything that you're doing, and just glad to be here. And thanks for everybody that took the time to listen to some fun stories, and appreciate you all.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. Guys, listen up. So just to close up, if you guys are interested in learning a little bit more about what Dustin's up to, you can go to dustinhillis.com, or you can go to allthingsnewventures.com. We're going to put the links below, so you don't even have to type it in. You just scroll down on your little app, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or if you're on YouTube watching this, just go to the comment section below or above the comment section, just hit description. You're going to see the links there. You can go find Dustin if you want to get a hold of him. Maybe you have a business that you would like some input in and maybe become partner with. If you just want to say hello, if you just want to check out a little bit what he's up to, make sure you click on that. Stay tuned for the podcast that we're going to have come out here. Like I said, it's going to be maybe a few weeks still out, but we're still putting it all together. But that's going to be pretty much this vibe for every episode, just talking about all sorts of different aspects of business. So if you want to really geek out, especially if you're a person that owns a company, you're a CEO, and you want to get into more of the nitty gritty, we just kind of barely even touched on it from the depth that we're actually going to get into in the actual podcast. So make sure you keep an eye out. And for that, we're going to be posting it on our Instagram, so you know that it's out, so you can go subscribe and follow it. And then last but not least, go check out our podcast. Make sure you find us on Instagram, follow, subscribe, like, all of those things. It really supports us a lot. If you want to go above and beyond and you want to support us financially, we do have a Patreon, and there are going to be some perks you're going to be able to get on that. Or there's the lowest level, it's just like $5, which is a Starbucks coffee for 1 month. And you just support us to keep the lights on and just to keep being able to do this part of our show, since we're really pivoting into doing some consulting for podcasting. And so my name is Andres Gamboa. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you on the next episode of Ponytails, and stay tuned. Bye-bye, everybody.